Chapter 1341. Taiposhi was flying. 30 years had passed since they set off, but Lu Xiaoyi felt like it had been 300 years. This was because he was constantly worried about the premonition of the collapse of the great Tao. True monarchs naturally had different feelings in this aspect, especially since he had created his own small universe and had 4 great Tao fragments in his sea of consciousness. This made his intuition sharper than others. Wen Ji stood beside him. "Little friend, you feel it too?" Lu Xiaoyi nodded. "Soon. It'll collapse within 2 years." Wen Ji laughed. "Looks like the old man's business isn't going to be easy. There's competition. Let's make it clear in advance that we should all set a uniform price. We can't maliciously lower the price and break the rules of the divination market." Lu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly. This old man was too careless. "But Taiposhi definitely won't be able to reach blue sky in 2 years. I looked at Taipu's star map just now. We probably have less than 5 years before we arrive," Wenji said leisurely. "Little friend, you're in the middle of the game. You're worried about gains and losses, but you're a bit stubborn. In my opinion, the collapse of the Great Tao isn't the time to attack, but the time to set off. Think about it. How can a realm like the 5th ring allow the enemy to stop outside the realm and wait for the enemy to attack? As long as it's within the range of detection, it'll definitely attack first. Therefore, the enemy's attack position must be very far away, far enough to avoid the 5th ring's eyes and ears. How far do you think this distance is?" His words woke everyone up. The old Taoist was right. The collapse of the Great Tao should be the time for the army to set off. There shouldn't be countless enemies lying in ambush outside the enemy's defensive formation. He had watched too many war movies in his previous life, so his thinking had fallen into a fixed pattern. With Wenji's reminder, he immediately made a judgment. "I don't know how far the enemy is hiding outside the ambush position, but I know how long it takes to travel from Heaven's Choice to Zhou-Xian. It takes less than 2 years for Heaven's Choice to travel alone to Zhou-Xian, so it'll definitely take longer for the army to set off. 2 to 3 years is the minimum. In that case, the enemy outside the 5th ring in blue sky will probably set their attack position near 3 years. It is very likely that we will arrive before the battle begins." Wen Ji nodded. "That's right. So from the looks of it now, the worst-case scenario is that we'll be able to arrive at the beginning of the Battle of Blue Sky. If we're lucky, we might even be able to hold a cocktail party in blue sky." Lu Xiaoyi's mood improved a lot. "You don't say," this old man occasionally spoke human words. "I wonder how many of Qin Kong's forces are left. I'm a little worried now. If clear sky leaves too many people behind, will it not show the importance of my reinforcement army? If Qin Kong has already been abandoned, won't I have to guard it alone?" Wen Ji, on the other hand, was thinking about another problem. Actually, the best time for Heaven's Choice to attack Zhou-Xian is when he breaks through the barrier between the 2 dimensions. If the tactics are used properly, he can cause serious damage to the opponent. Just like what happened to your Black Beast sect. Do you think Zhou-Xian will do that? Lu Xiaoyi was resolute and decisive. "No. That's not the style of Zhou-Xian people. Using the space channel to block the battle will definitely be the choice of the 5th ring, but it will definitely not be Zhou-Xian's choice. Heaven's Choice people are not fools. With their identity as the natives of the negative space and their deep understanding of the negative space, how can there only be one waymark for them to pass through? That must be the transition of several channels at the same time. Once entangled in the universe, Zhou-Xian people will have a hard time escaping unscathed. If they really lose a large amount of cultivation power in the void, what will they use to set up the chessboard of heaven and earth? The 5th ring is different. They have a strong desire to attack and rich experience in chaotic battles. They also don't have the heaven and earth great membrane, so they must be pulled out to fight. Initiative and passivity, how could it be clearly defined? Success and failure were the same. Because Zhou-Xian had the chessboard of heaven and earth, the cultivators themselves were not aggressive enough. The 5th ring was very aggressive, but that was also forced out. It was impossible to have the best of both worlds. The fifth ring's personality and habits would never match a spiritual item like the chessboard of heaven and earth. Therefore, there was no good or bad strategy, as long as it was suitable for oneself. Pulling the fifth ring people to Zhou Xian to play the chessboard, or letting Zhou Xian go to the fifth ring to fight in the wild, that would be the real disaster. In the silence, Lu Xiaoyi's sharp eyes suddenly noticed a figure outside the void. He reacted quickly and immediately jumped out of Tai Poshi, laughing loudly. "You untrustworthy cow-nose. You said you were going to scout, but you King ran back home by yourself? 3,000 Ziqing, I'll give you a ride. This is the price of friendship. If it was someone else, I wouldn't care if they died." One went out and two came back. But since they were brought back by the general, it didn't matter. When Qing Xian entered Tai Poshi, he was shocked. Close to 400, 500 perfected lords, close to 2,000 yuanying, this formation. How did this guy do it? Lu Xiaoyi was proud. How is it? This is not weak, right? You can see the difference, right? I'm returning home in glory, you're running away. We're all from Zhou Xian, how did you do it? Qing Xian's stomach was full of surprise, but it instantly turned into anger. Not only did he cheat his spiritual opportunity, his words were vicious and hurtful. He couldn't be friends anymore. After a battle of words, he finally figured out the whole story. He couldn't help but be amazed by this guy's ability to pull people together. Because he wasn't in Zhou Xian, he didn't make it to the Tianzi mainland in time. But he knew that even if he was there, he couldn't have pulled so many people together. Because of his three clear orthodoxy, he couldn't find so many companions in the abyss of suffering. When others saw his background, they would naturally be on guard. Why would he pull people together? It was good enough that he wasn't suspected of being a spy. He was a little unhappy, the contrast was too big. Now that he was the self-appointed general, to Qing Xian, there was a subtle change in their relationship of equals. As a rational person, how could he turn a blind eye to such a strong army of cultivators? Of course, he couldn't hold any position in it. This was his last pride. Lu Xiaoyi didn't hold back. He knew very well that it would be bad to discuss it now, so he went straight to the point. Qing Xian, I'll be honest. This time, you have to listen to me. I have a mission for you. Qing Xian didn't comment, but fortunately, he didn't object. This was a disguised consent. Lu Xiaoyi said seriously. You and I don't know the specific situation of Qing Kong. If the fifth ring has a large army on it, then needless to say, the two of us have to listen to those old farts in the sect. But if the fifth ring has given up on Qing Kong, or only left a small number of people on Qing Kong, the two of us have to bear this responsibility. The influence of the three clear ones on Qing Kong is much stronger than my Xianyuan. What I want you to do is to control the forces left behind by the three clear ones, including the followers of the three clear ones. We can only survive in this war if we work together. We must not lose our footing. Is that okay? Qing Xian said in a low voice. Okay. Leave the three clear ones to me. If anyone disobeys, I'll kill him. Chapter 1342. During this period of time, Yan Chang and Yan Dai had been busy, very busy. On the contrary, Shao Mountain was the most relaxed. Because the old guys listened to their arrangements unconditionally. However, the number of old people on Elder Ending Peak was limited, especially the Yuaning perfected cultivators. There were only 50 of them, and their fighting strength was somewhat reduced. After all, Elder Ending Peak of Shao Mountain was only the place where the Blue Sky sect cultivators returned to glory, not the entire Xianyuan. How could those old cultivators from the Fifth Ring and other regions come all the way here to retire? They were basically enjoying their old age in the Fifth Ring. The young ones were running around outside, and the old guys were fully supporting them. The mobilization of the northern region for war was quite smooth. After all, this was Xuanyuan's headquarters. Sects big and small had been looking up to Xianyuan for a long time and didn't dare to disobey. They more or less pulled together a group of about 300 yuanying. The difficulties lay in the other continents. There were many reasons. One was that they didn't belong to Xianyuan. The most important thing was that the Blue Sky sect and the Blue Sky sect had run away. Why should they leave the small fries to bear the burden alone? The glory is yours, and the suffering is ours? You poked a huge hole, and you left us to take the blame? Since the main forces ran to protect the fifth ring, what was the Blue Sky sect? With such a mentality, many capable cultivators entered the void to hide. The remaining ones only cared about their own mountain gates and weren't willing to contribute to the defense of the Blue Sky sect. In their eyes, either no one would come, and they would pass this hurdle by luck, or if they did come, they wouldn't be able to stop it. Why bother? Most of the forces thought that if there really was an invasion, their target would be Xianyuan and the three pure ones. It had nothing to do with them. This was the worst consequence of the three pure ones and Xianyuan leaving the Blue Sky sect. The people's hearts were scattered. There were no reinforcements, and most of them had left. This was the cruel reality. Under such a reality, how could you encourage the Blue Sky sect cultivators to do their duty? It was needless to say that protecting one's home was a responsibility, but the Blue Sky sect was everyone's home. The escape of the three pure ones and Xianyuan hurt everyone. This was the biggest obstacle for Yan Chang and the others to get in touch. This thorn was buried in the hearts of the Blue Sky people. It was not something they could explain with their glib tongue. Furthermore, the three pristine ones were not very cooperative either. Those solitary elders who stayed behind were only thinking about how to live and die together with the mountain gate. They did not think about defending the grand membrane of heaven and earth. However, they were not entirely to blame. They knew that it would be futile, so why bother? The few of them wanted to do something big, but when it came to it, they realized that not everyone could do something big. The only place they could manage was Pyrolite Mountain and the northern region. As for the other places, they were powerless. That night, the six of them sat on the empty Wingguang Peak, drinking to drown their sorrows. Li Peinan was very frustrated. After so many years, she knew that it must be dangerous to stay with Bingke, but why didn't she know how to repent? If Bingke was willing to stay, he could just leave. Less than 300. There were only a few perfected lords, and they were basically all old and weak. It's not a problem to drag them out for a group fight, but to defend against the grand membrane of heaven and earth. By the way, can we stand together with so few people? Yen Bo was not affected. Isn't it enough for one person to defend a wider area? For example, you can defend the sky above the northern region. He was trying to find joy in the midst of bitterness, but the others were not in the mood. Yen Chung looked at Yen Dai beside him. Senior sister, why do you want to stay? You are the inner sword perfected lord, and you have a bright future. Besides, you have nothing to do with Qin Kong. It's a feeling, I can't describe it, but this is the hometown of Crow ancestor, and that guy also disappeared from here. I don't know what I am waiting for or looking for, but my intuition is guiding me to stay here, and wait for changes. Yen Dai said vaguely, because her heart was very vague. Huang Xia curled her lips. We were all fooled here, but the one who fooled us didn't show up. Bingke was still indifferent. What do you think if senior brother was here, what would he do? Run away! Everyone said in unison. Although everyone wanted to appear relaxed, the pressure of the chaotic world still made everyone feel heavy. A sharp sword was hanging over their heads, and they didn't know when it would fall. This kind of feeling made them a little restless, even though they were cultivators. The key point was that this was not the void of the universe, and they couldn't be allowed to wander around freely. Under the pressure of the army, this was a land of death. Cultivators rarely encountered this kind of situation in battle, and they had to persist for a reason. This might be beneficial to their transformation, but the premise was that they had to survive first. What was the meaning of persisting? Yanqing looked up at the starry sky silently. She had the meaning of persisting, because this was her hometown. She came back here in desperation, and Qin Kong gave her the best gift, successfully becoming a monarch. But was this all? It didn't seem to be. That guy used his 600 years of disappearance to point out a vague path for them, but he hid himself. She knew what Yundai meant, what was a feeling. It was to throw oneself into this grand cosmic tide and participate from the beginning to the end. Only then could one's own future and the future of the universe be in sync and form a trend. In the end, the people who were most in tune with the changes of the universe would have the opportunity to obtain the greatest benefits when the era changed. This principle was not difficult to understand. Almost every major cultivator had a similar feeling. It was just that they had chosen the fifth ring as their starting point, while their small group had chosen the blue sky peak. It wasn't that they were sharper and more far-sighted than others, but in the dome of the fifth ring, many people were passionate about defending Qin Kong. There were even rumors that in Xuanyuan's sun god meeting, there were sun god monarchs who fiercely opposed and requested to focus on defending Qin Kong. But Xianyuan was a collective, and in the end, they had to show their collective strength. Some cultivators who wanted to serve Qin Kong had to suppress their desire and choose to follow the general situation. This was the helplessness of being in the fifth ring. But people like them had the opportunity to be independent. Cultivators in the fifth ring were not allowed to act rashly, but those in Qin Kong could stay. This was the mystery of the Qing sword token. Judgment was judgment, and luck was luck. Both were indispensable. But now, at least from her point of view, she didn't see anything special. Qin Kong was still that quiet Qin Kong. Even the atmosphere seemed indifferent because most people had given up resisting, but it was far from the tense feeling of preparing for war in the fifth ring. Lazy, loose, going with the flow, muddling along, such an atmosphere surrounded this once great planet. It was hard to believe that so many great people had once walked out of this place. Rome wasn't built in a single day. 10,000 years of peace and tranquility had caused the people of Blue Sky to lose the temperament that they were once so proud of. In the end, with the retreat of the three pure ones, Xianyuan, they completely collapsed. No one would be able to reverse such a situation. Unless the army of the fifth ring came in person, they could only change the result, but they might not be able to change the hearts of the people here. That bastard had been indulging himself since he was in Qin Kong. Did he never think that there would be such a result today? Just like what the ice guest said, a reversal seemed to only exist in the absurd plots of biographies and novels, and not real reality. Everyone was in deep thought and didn't say anything. Suddenly, the universe seemed to have paused for a moment. Then came Li Peinan's sharp voice, even though she was so old. My fate is in my own hands, not in the hands of the heavens. It's too easy to collapse. Chapter 1343. In the Heaven's Choice Continent, Taoist Pang raised his head. It's starting! In the Shou Xian Upper Realm, Bai Mei placed a piece. It's starting! In the Fifth Ring region, Chang Jin took a deep breath. It's starting! It's starting! It's starting! Wenji was a little excited. Although it wasn't good to fight, he had the intention to watch the show. Tai? It's unexpected, but also reasonable. Great, there's no need to guess. The next few great Tao collapses have been decided. After Tai it will be Tai Chu, then Tai Shi, Tai Su, Tai Chi, and Han Dun. It can't be wrong. It's a calabash brother on a vine. You can't fall off, but you can't run away either. It's starting, a big scene. It's a blessing to be born in this era. Hey, little friend, why are you still sleeping? It's starting. Collapse. Lu Xiaoyi flipped over. It's up to you. Old man, how big of a deal is this? Why are you so anxious? Don't talk about one collapse, I've seen hundreds and thousands of collapsing at the same time. Have you heard of falling limit? Do you know how powerful it is? If you collapse inside, you won't be able to run away. Wenji couldn't be bothered with his usual nonsense. He said to himself, Get up, it's time to prepare. Lu Shi went back to sleep. Prepare for what? We've been preparing for over 100 years. Stop arguing. Call me when we're there. Wenji was helpless. He looked around. Qin Xian's soul was wandering, the The swordsmen were still as before, and the immemorial beasts were still. Sai, with his determination, when it came to it, he couldn't even compare to these murderous fools. Yanqing jumped up. Behind her, Huang Xiaya hurriedly asked, "Senior sister, where are you going?" Yan Cheng's expression was firm. "I'm going to Nanluo Ningzhou again. Even if I can pull one more, it'll be an extra force." Yan Dai also stood up. "Then I'll go to Donghai Linzhou." Yan Bo leaped away. "Zygosa Prefecture." Huang Xiaya jumped up. "I'm slow, so I'll go to Chuanchang Plateau." Bingke had a face of righteousness. "Fanzhang Island is tough, of course I'll go." Li Peinan was the last one to react. "The Thousand Island region? That place doesn't suit me. Who wants to switch places with me? We're all brothers and sisters." The swordsman would never sit still and wait for death. The hope was slim, and the chances were slim. It wasn't that they hadn't been to these places before. In fact, they had been there many times. But the people there either spoke ill of them, closed their doors, refused to see them, sighed about their strength, or said that they didn't have enough manpower. In any case, no one was willing to go crazy with these sword lunatics. With no hope in sight, most of them chose to give up. He abandoned the pride of the Blue Sky tribe and only cared about his own continent, sect, and family. All of this was not something that could be solved by persuading them patiently, because they themselves were not strong enough. All the adults in their families had run away, leaving behind a few youngsters to trick them into becoming cannon fodder. It was very difficult. He had to endure all the supercilious looks. But no matter how difficult it was, they wanted to do it again. Because the collapse of the Great Tao was clearly a signal. From the moment Tai collapsed, the enemy had begun their journey. They did not have much time left. The Heaven's Choice continent was completely sealed. Tens of thousands of cultivators were divided into two distinct camps and walked out in a single file. One was the Buddhist group, and the other was the Taoist group. In terms of numbers, they were evenly matched. There were more than 200 yang gods, several perfected lords, and countless yuanying. This was the number that half of the Heaven's Choice cultivators were unwilling to follow. From this, it could be seen that the strength of the Heaven's Choice cultivators was terrifying. This was also the reason why even someone as strong as the Fifth Ring never planned to take the initiative to attack the Heaven's Choice. They really couldn't afford to attack. The Buddhist and Taoist armies tacitly separated into two sides of the Heaven's Choice army. In fact, at this point, everyone's goal was already clear. It was just that no one said anything. They would wait until they reached the heaven and earth chessboard of the main world, Zhou Xian, before making a decision. They appeared to be united, but they were divided at heart. This clearly showed the current mentality of the Heaven's Choice people. But their wisdom was that they had chosen a very suitable opponent. They would never go to the distant Fifth Ring. This was war. The most important thing was not the tactics, nor was it the strategy. It was how to choose the opponent. A power that always chose kindergarten-level opponents was a power that would never decline. On this point, the Heaven's Choice people had done it. It could also be said that the people of Zhou Xian had also done it. It was a competition of being worse. The real battle was not here. And in the distance, in a part of the starry sky, more than 20 large treasure ships were flying quickly against the dark background of the void. No one knew what orthodoxy this was or which power they belonged to. At least, they couldn't tell from the treasure ships. In the treasure ship in the lead, 5 monks stood in front of the porthole with cold and solemn expressions. Their attack base was a little far away. Even if the treasure ship flew at full speed, it would still take 2 to 3 years to enter the once famous Suzhou star system in the universe. It couldn't be helped because the target they were attacking had the most warlike orthodoxy in the universe. Once they were exposed, the attack power would be launched from the Fifth Ring. There were no accidents. Therefore, outside the universe where Suzhou was located, they could only set up a decent large-scale Buddhist association, gathering the forces of Buddhism from dozens of universes. In the name of the Buddhist Association, they were actually gathering people. When the Great Tao collapsed, they would set off immediately. All of this was successfully hidden from the eyes of the people of Qing Kong. Of course, the current Qing Kong was no different from a blind man. They were no longer as aggressive as they were in their heyday. Their cultivators' movements outside the universe were very limited. Of course, they wouldn't notice the large-scale Buddhist assembly on the other side of the universe. In fact, their real goal was the gathering place of the army. In the process of gathering and waiting, there were new changes in the situation. Through their spies, they found out that Qing Kong had been abandoned by the Fifth Ring and had become an empty territory. This made them feel like they had punched empty air. After careful judgment, they also made adjustments to their plan. It was impossible to mobilize the army when the war was approaching. They were too big a target. Once they were discovered, all their previous efforts would be wasted. Therefore, 5 of the 10 great Buddhas of young spirit that had been prepared secretly transferred to another Buddhist force that was attacking the Fifth Ring. That force was the main force of Buddhism, far from what they could compare to. A few great Buddhas of young God were small targets and wouldn't easily attract attention when they moved, so it was completely feasible to deploy their forces. As for their side division, except for the 5 great Buddhas, the rest of the little Buddhas and Bodhisattvas were still there. They continued to attack the original target, Qing Kong. Carelessness was the most taboo in war. As the mother planet that had once given birth to a mighty sword immortal in the universe, they couldn't overemphasize it. Qing Kong still had the heaven and earth great membrane, and there were still countless large and small sects and forces. If these forces really gathered together, it wouldn't be easy to fight. Therefore, this fleet had more than 8,000 monks and 5 great Buddhas. Against the heaven and earth great membrane of Qing Kong, how many perfected lords Yuaning? 2,000? The suppression of strength was obvious. The most important thing was that Qing Kong didn't have a sun god. This was confirmed. They had all gone to the Fifth Ring. It was a well-deserved victory. It was just a matter of time. Chapter 1344. Under the gaze of the heavenly axiom, more chaos was happening. In the negative space, a rare group of meteorites floated quietly in the void, unchanged since time immemorial. However, after the Great Tao collapsed, the 5 meteorites in the group of meteorites slowly began to change. It was as if a cosmic shock wave had swept past, and the debris on the 5 meteorites began to vibrate more and more violently. A human perfected monarchine master was moving around in this group of meteorites. He came from a medium-sized force in the Fifth Ring, and his main purpose of staying here was to monitor the negative space nearby to see if there were any strange, abnormal, or large groups of true cultivators. However, he was a little absent-minded now because the Great Tao collapsed, and he just happened to need such Great Tao fragments. Because of the importance of this matter, he couldn't leave easily, so he was a little annoyed. When he noticed the abnormality of the 5 meteorites, he naturally and unnaturally thought of the collapse of the Great Tao, but he neglected his purpose of coming here. The vibrations became more and more intense, as if something was about to break through the walls of the 5 meteorites. The perfected monarch, who realized that something was wrong, wanted to escape, but there wasn't enough time. A bug suddenly flew out. The strength of the sun god realm made all the resistance of the human meaningless. The bug was caught in its mouth, and with a few crunches, it swallowed it whole. The bug was still chewing its mouthpart, and the aftertaste was delicious. Behind it, the 5 meteorites collapsed one after another, revealing 5 incomparably huge bug hives. For a moment, the bug swarm covered the sky. After being silent for hundreds of years, it was finally time for them to kill. The bug hives gradually accelerated, and with the big bug beast beside them, they began to fly into the depths of the universe. This distance was planned long ago. In 2 to 3 years, they would launch an attack from all directions. The bug swarm appeared in a very simple and effective way, but it was also very clumsy. This depended on one's temperament and skills. However, there were also some that made a dazzling appearance. For example, in a remote airspace outside the five-ring tripartite universe of the origin world, an old rotary turtle was looking at the void with lifeless eyes. Due to some reason, its lifespan had come to an end, but before it died, what could it do for the immemorial Sacred Beast clan? Slowly, the revolving turtle's eyes grew dimmer and dimmer. However, there was a faint radiance on its back. This was one of the innate skills of the Holy Beast's revolving turtle. Through the shells of the two black turtles, they could create a super long-distance spatial tunnel. Of course, when the tunnel disappeared after a period of time, the two revolving turtles would die of old age. Gradually, the light on the tortoise shell became brighter and brighter. The rotary tortoise endured the pain and tried its best to maintain the stability of the spatial tunnel. When the spatial tunnel was completely established, a holy beast leaped out. Between the heavens and the earth, the pair of ducks riding the geese, the feathers of the heavens, the wind of 90,000 shaking the scales of the sea, the water of 3,000. This was a legendary Kunping. Of course, a Kunping of the perfected monarch level was considered a baby of the Kunping race. The word baby meant that they were hundreds of thousands of years old, not a few years old like humans. It was like opening a box of strange beasts. The Kunping came out first, and then all kinds of strange beasts came out in groups. Dragon, Zhuyan, Swan Ni, Shuhui, Cheongqi, Bifong Yingyu, Revolving Turtle, Scarlet Pheasant, Chongdiao, Churu, Tiger Flood Dragon, Swan Yang. There were more than 400 of them, and they were all at the perfected monarch level. When the holy beasts passed, the revolving turtle let out a mournful cry and turned into a black light. It had completed its mission. The Kunping spread its wings and let out a clear cry. Fifth ring humans have betrayed us and restarted the era, rebuilding the world. If this can be tolerated, what else can we tolerate? We didn't come here on impulse to start a war. This is a matter of life and death for our race, and we have no choice but to fight. We have no choice but to change. When the era changes, the immemorial beast holy beast is unknown. That is the true calamity of our holy beast race. I have a premonition that during this great change in the universe, the vicious beasts are also involved, and they are standing on the side of the fifth ring humans. For the immemorial beast race, for the inheritance of the holy beasts, we have no other choice. Under the agitation of the crowd, the holy beasts began to fly forward. No one cared whether the Kunpeng's words were true or false, because to them, whoever touched their interests and violated their rights, they had a reason to fight. The fifth ring humans had pushed down the first domino of the great Tao, and they were the main culprits. If they didn't fight them, who else could they fight? In a certain space, a dozen Buddhas each held a Buddhist weapon and were setting up a special space transmission array. This transmission array had been prepared for hundreds of years, and it had been integrated with the wisdom of countless Buddhist powerhouses. It was somewhat heaven-defying. In theory, such a Buddhist formation couldn't succeed, because it violated some of the rules of the heavenly Tao. But now, 7 great Taos had collapsed, and the control of the heavenly Tao was not as good as before. Some heaven-defying things were gradually being researched, just like how they were opening the passage this time. After a few days, the transmission array took shape and began to operate slowly, gradually increasing the energy intensity. This process continued for more than a month before the passage was truly stabilized. Then, a creature rushed out and looked around vigilantly. It was a winged person. A great divine winged person. After confirming that it was safe, it let out a cry unique to the winged person. Then, as if a hole had been opened in a dam, a flood began to pour out, unstoppable. Dozens, hundreds, thousands, the transmission array couldn't hold on any longer and trembled slightly. But these winged people didn't care at all. They were like prisoners in prison, yearning for a free life outside. Finally, because the transmission array wasn't perfect, it collapsed under the endless attacks of the winged people. Countless winged people were torn to pieces when the spatial passage collapsed. These losses, however, didn't matter to the winged people. In the end, nearly 10,000 winged people rushed in. Although this kind of strength was not much different from the thousands of Buddhist forces outside, There was a difference between heaven and earth in terms of true combat strength. Defeating those Buddhist forces, killing 30% of them would probably be enough to shake their morale, but against these fierce and stubborn winged people, you had to kill until the last one. In ancient times there were ping birds that lived in the sky. At the beginning of the universe, they multiplied and multiplied. They hated that the sky wasn't high enough, and they threw pellets. The heavenly Tao was clear, and the ping returned to the constitution. It was said that there was such a race, the descendants of the great ping. They had strange powers and could throw stars like pellets. Later on, the heavenly Tao probably felt that they had gone too far and affected the balance of the cultivation world, so it set up a constitution to restrain them. They were forced to leave their living space, leaving behind only some descendants with thin bloodlines in the original space. Because their abilities could not reach the level of their ancestors, they could not ascend to the heavens. After several eras, they struggled to survive in the original space, where the environment was getting worse and worse, and they were always waiting for a way out of their predicament. This space was called Winged Sky. Chapter 1345. The race in this space was called the Winged Race, a distant relative of the ancient ping. Although they had gone through several eras and no longer had the magical abilities of the ping, their starting point was much higher than that of humans. They were born with the ability to fly, and all of them had magical abilities that could only be cultivated. They were the perfect combination of the ancient divine beast bloodline and the human bloodline, possessing both innate magical abilities and acquired techniques. For such a race, everyone had abilities. Their intelligence development was no different from that of humans. If they weren't trapped in one place, if it wasn't for the fact that their reproduction wasn't satisfactory, if they were really placed in the universe, it wouldn't necessarily be just humans that dominated the universe. Parallel spaces didn't belong to or communicate with each other. Although the winged race was strong, they had nothing to do with the human world. However, hundreds of thousands of years ago, a passage had appeared between the winged race and the human world. The location was fixed, but it didn't last. According to some mysterious law, the two spaces would intersect at certain times, providing each side with the possibility of entering the other space. Such a place would naturally be guarded by human cultivators. In fact, humans had guarded it and never let the winged race take a step into the main world. This place was called Planet Vanguard. It was the place where the human cultivator army gathered. However, the monks didn't set up the transmission array near Planet Vanguard. They set it up several universes away from the fifth ring, providing another exit for the winged race through a special space passage. Although this exit was a bit unstable and couldn't pass through the entire winged race, it was enough for a war. This was a force that could change the outcome of the war. The great heavenly wing with the highest status came in front of the Buddhas with an unhappy expression. The condition we reached before was to pass through 30% of the winged race at once, which means at least 100,000. But now, there are only 10,000. There are also hundreds of people who died in the space passage for no reason. We want to know, is this the end of your Buddhist sex transmission? Or do you want to continue setting up the transmission array? Facing tens of thousands of winged race, the Buddhas weren't afraid at all. Their leader's tone was firm. Passing through 30% of the winged race is the ultimate goal. Any more and the heavenly Tao won't tolerate it. You know this very well. Nothing can be obtained for free. Our Buddhist sect has no obligation to help you return to the main world. How many of you can come over will depend on the role you play in this war. 10,000 is the fixed number this time, and there won't be a second time. Unless the war ends and we emerge victorious, everyone will sit down and discuss the merits and rewards. Then, we'll decide how many you winged race can cross next time. Does Winged Monarch understand what I mean? The great heaven's wings stared straight at him, unable to suppress his anger. That's not what you said before. If the Buddhist League goes back on their words, is their goal to use these 10,000 people as chess pieces, and throw them away when they are done with them? The Buddha did not back down. Every side is taking a risk. No one could guarantee anything. You are taking a risk, and you need to bet on the sincerity of us humans. My Buddhist sect is also taking a risk. We need to see the reactions of the various powers in the origin world. Will we incur public anger? If you winged people are willing to gamble, then go ahead. If you don't want to bet, then please leave. Great Heavenly Wings threatened. I don't believe that my 10,000-odd clansmen won't be able to find a place to settle down after I kill you old bald donkeys. The Buddha scoffed. Of course you have the right to do so, and you have the ability to do so. And then? You will become the public enemy of the entire cultivation world of the origin world. No power will let you go until you slowly disappear in the river of time. I bet that it won't take more than 500 years. If you insist, then enjoy your last 500 years of happiness. The great Heaven's Wings knew that there was nothing they could do to change the situation. The Buddhist League had its cunning, and the winged race also had its calculations. If 100,000 clansmen really came over, who would still fight to the death? Wouldn't it be better to find a better world to occupy? However, the cunning of humans was not something they could recklessly predict. It seemed that they still had to fight this battle. Fine, just treat it as the price they had to pay for the winged race's return to the origin world this time. It was impossible to achieve their goal without shedding blood. Under the leadership of the 10 Buddhas, the winged race army did not hide anything. They majestically passed through the origin world and entered the origin world's struggle for the future of their race. The heavenly smoke puppet was very, very tired. After 2 years of running around, she had gained very little. Even if she spoke until her throat was hoarse, in most cases, it was just a waste of breath. She was the last to return to Mount Shao. When she met her fellow disciples, they were all very embarrassed because everyone was the same. The departure of the main body of the Xianyuan 3 Pure Ones was too big a blow to the people of Qin Kong. Most of the powers would rather see Qin Kong being attacked than to protect their dignity. In their opinion, the moment the Xianyuan 3 Pure Ones left, Qin Kong had already lost its dignity. A force melon is not sweet, so I didn't twist much. The ice guests blushed with shame. The few of them were speechless. When they tried their best, they realized how difficult it was to never give up in the dictionary of the Xianyuan swordsman. They did not ask for a 50-50 chance. Even if there was only a 10% chance of winning, they dared to fight for it. However, the problem now was that even 10% of winning seemed to be out of reach. There was no quantity at all. There was no quality to talk about. There was no courage to fight and the determination to face death with equanimity. How could they fight such a battle? Previously, they had looked down on the old guys on Zhonglao Peak. Each of them only knew how to donate their broken bodies, but did not know how to turn the tide. Now they understood that those old guys had already seen through all of this, so they did not need to waste any effort. They ate, drank, and played. When the enemy came, killing one was enough. Killing two was a win. It was a simple way of thinking, but also the most practical. They had the intention to kill the enemy, but were powerless to reverse the situation. This was the most intuitive feeling they had. Only Yen Bo still had a lofty look on his face. What's there to be troubled about? Let me see. Don't guard the great membrane of heaven and earth. It doesn't conform to the fighting habits of the swordsman. Let's just drag them out. If the enemy comes, we'll fight them head on. At least we'll have a quick death. Why think so much? We cultivators cultivate our whole life. If we can't let go of our desires in the end, wouldn't we have wasted our whole life? Yen Bo wanted to reprimand him, but he could not say anything. However, Yen Dai, who was beside him, expressed her support, which was rare. What Yen Bo said is actually not wrong. Junior Marshal Sister, let's make our own choices. Those who are willing to go out with us can go out and kill to their heart's content. Those who are willing to stay in the great membrane of heaven and earth can do whatever they want. Those who only want to guard their own mountain gate can also ignore them. We've already tried our best. Why think so much? Ice Guest's drummer supported him. Okay. Senior Marshal Brother Cigarette but told me a long time ago that it's better for swordsmen to fight in an open space. If we can't win, we can still run. The universe is vast. Maybe we can save our lives. The others glared at him with murderous gazes. This coward only spoke the truth. Chapter 1346. Tai-Pu Jun finally stopped its long journey. It had arrived at its destination. This was still an unfamiliar space. Even to Lu Xiaoyi and Qin Xian, they were not sure if this was the Zhuozhou's system. This was because when they left, they were still two small Jin Dan who could not leave the void. However, there was one thing that could be confirmed. That was the towering tree that stopped not far away from Taiposhi. It was hanging alone in the void. This must be the legendary Zhuozhou system's innate spiritual treasure, Tai-Pu Jun, right? There was no time to feel sad. Lu Xiaoyi jumped out of Taiposhi and shouted, "Demon Blade!" The swordsmen immediately took form. They took the lead and sprinted forward. Behind them were the Martial Saint Training Hall, Blood River Sect, Physique and Soul Cultivators. Beside them were 300 ferocious and ugly immemorial vicious beasts. These 2,000 people really took up their stances and ran in the void. Their power was unstoppable. There were no weaklings in his team. There were 300 swordsmen. Among them, 30 of them were from the Shaking Shadow Realm. They were the best of the best in Zhou Xian. The rest were from the Heaven's Choice Realm. They were also the elites of the Heaven's Choice Realm. Not a single one of them was an ordinary person. As for the remaining 4 human orthodoxies, which one of them did not struggle to survive in the face of adversity? If they were not strong enough, why were they the only ones who dared to go against the mainstream of the Heaven's Choice Realm? Not to mention the 300 vicious beasts. They were a group of true elites. From the big tree to the blue sky, it would take several months. They would pass by several realms along the way. In a rush, Lu Xiaoyi would not follow the rules of the universe's realms. He would not talk nonsense like the sacred and inviolable airspace. Even if he walked in a straight line or took a shortcut, there was no need to be secretive. It was rare to see cultivators wandering around the Zhuozhou system. They all knew that a great war was coming. If they were still showing off outside, wouldn't it be a pity if they were crushed into powder by the army? However, within the realm's airspace, there were still cultivators on guard. Seeing such a huge army sweeping over, who would not be shocked? Who wouldn't be afraid? Fortunately, the target of this army was not them. Instead, they were flying straight towards the blue sky. This was also in line with the judgment of the people of Zhuozhou regarding the nature of this battle. Qin Kong was finished. There were a few cultivators who were watching from afar. They didn't dare to move forward, but they also didn't dare to move too far away. They were afraid that the other party would misunderstand their actions. It was only after the army had passed that he regained his senses. One of the cultivators sighed. "I, when Qin Kong, have already given up on defense. How long can we last against such a powerful army with our current scattered forces? 2 hours? 4 hours? I bet that if they really fought, they wouldn't last more than a day." Everyone agreed. It was no secret that the 3 pure ones Xian Yuan had left Qin Kong, especially since the 3 pure ones had left very early. Therefore, the entire Zhuozhou had already understood their purpose, which was to cling to the 5 rings and not to fight on 2 fronts. However, if that was the case, the small and medium-sized sects that remained in the Azure Sky continent would be in trouble. It would be better if they were good at licking their boots. If they were stubborn, it would be easy for their sects to be annihilated. However, there was also a cultivator who raised a different opinion. "Senior brother, since they are attacking Qin Kong, why does the vanguard seem to be a group of swordsmen? Everyone knows that Qin Kong has the universe's #1 sword vein, Xian Yuan. Swordsmen fighting swordsmen, how strange!" An old man lectured. "How old are you? Haven't you seen a Taoist fighting another Taoist? A monk killing a bald man? The universe is too big. The sword vein might not be a single piece of iron." The young Yuanying was still unconvinced. "Look at those beasts, aren't they the legendary sacred beasts of ancient times? Why do they look so strange? Shouldn't they be sacred beasts like dragons, cheilants, and rocks? Why are there so many of them with 9 heads? Are they running so fast that their heads are swaying? Xian Yuan received the news. Even a rotten ship would have 3 caddies of nails. Furthermore, the current Xian Yuan 3 pure ones weren't that bad. They were just running away. They still had a considerable number of supporters in Zhuozhou. Although their current support wasn't enough to pull out their swords to help, it wasn't a problem for them to send a message. If Xian Yuan 3 pure ones were here, they would gather people to help because of their so-called friendship. After all, these 2 sects had never lost an interstellar war in history. However, if the main sect wasn't here, it would be a different matter if you asked these guests to risk their lives. It didn't matter what the 3 pure ones did. Xian Yuan people could only take care of themselves now. More than 200 cultivators gathered in the sky above Shao Mountain. Most of them were Yuanying, and there were only a few perfected immortals. Among them, there were dozens of Xian Yuan swordsmen. The rest were the tyrants of the north, Xuanyuan's loyal lackeys. No matter what, there were still many cultivators with integrity. This was determined by the cultivation atmosphere of the north. Moreover, if Xian Yuan was in trouble, the other sects in the north wouldn't be any better. This was a voluntary assault. There was a very deep consideration in this. This was because the Xian Yuan sword cultivators could better display their skills and tactics in the void, and also because it was easier for them to escape from the battle in the void. This was not because they were afraid of death, but because they had a bottom line in their cultivation. It was certain that most of these people would die in a real battle. Even so, as the commander, he had to consider leaving a chance for those who were willing to leave. This was the kindling and the inheritance of Tao. As for who was willing to leave and who was willing to die for the sword, it was purely up to nature. Who could say for sure until the last moment? The most important thing was the consideration for the people of the north, and the cultivation world of the north. Under the premise that they could not defend the place no matter what, it would be more satisfying, faster, and more righteous to rush out and fight. Relatively speaking, it would make it harder for the enemy to retaliate. They might respect these martyrs very much, and the feelings that came from this would not bring the anger of the casualties to the occupied northern region. Shao Mountain might not be burned down, and the sects in the north wouldn't be plowed through. On the other hand, if they relied on the world macromembrane to fight, it could be expected that this method would cause more losses to the attackers. Then, some irrational people would vent their anger in inappropriate ways. That would be a disaster. Therefore, since the world macromembrane couldn't be defended, the best choice was to fight outside. Swordsman's hot-bloodedness had a lot of considerations. It wasn't that it wasn't pure, but that it cherished the sects and the people of the north. This was a real swordsman. The 3 pure ones, as well as the blue sky sect's various sects and forces, were all apprehensive in this regard. Therefore, they deeply hated the 3 pure ones and Xian Yuan. If they were all here, would they have to swallow their anger like this? Yan Tsang, Yan Dai, Yan Bo, Huang Xiuya, Li Peinan, Binggujian, and a few young swordsmen who volunteered to stay left Shao Mountain alone with dozens of old, weak, sick, and disabled people of the Old Man Peak and more than 100 people of the north who didn't fear death. They disappeared in the tears of the disciples. What they wanted to prove was that even if the Xian Yuan retreated, it was only a strategic retreat. It wasn't that the Xian Yuan people were bent. The whole cultivation world of the north fell into a tragic atmosphere. Shao Mountain was indeed the toughest continent in the blue sky sect. Almost no one fled. If they couldn't defend the world macromembrane because their realm wasn't high enough, then they would defend the mountain gate, the city, the mountains, the rivers, and everything that should be protected. Chapter 1347. This team passed through the Qi layer and entered the void. Although the composition was a little mixed, there was an unyielding aura that could not be underestimated. Their aura could be contagious. Perhaps when they flew out, there were still cultivators regretting that they were hot-headed enough to pretend to be a big shot. But when 200 people gathered together to face death, some of their selfish thoughts were completely squeezed out. What was left was to face death with equanimity, and how to explode with brilliance at the last moment of their lives. Humans were social creatures. This was also why it was difficult to overcome the fear in one's heart by committing suicide alone. But if there was a companion, it would be much easier. One would not be lonely on the road to the netherworld. While flying, Li Peinan lowered his voice. Ice Guest! Why the hell are you trembling? You made me. Ice Guest was not convinced. I'm not trembling. I'm surging my transcendence energy. Brotherly, don't blame me for your trembling, okay? An old Yuanying following behind them laughed. Don't be embarrassed, there's nothing to be ashamed of. In this world, who doesn't have a timid and fearful time? If you can still rush forward with your heart beating like a drum, you are a hero. Do you think those who rush to the front are all fearless? They are also cursing in their hearts. They are cursing the heavens for being unfair. They are cursing the commander-in-chief for taking revenge. They are cursing their bad luck. But I want to tell you a truth about war. Those who rush to the front may not necessarily die the fastest. When the real battle starts, even if you want to tremble, you won't have the chance. So, tremble to your heart's content. As long as there is faith, there is nothing to fear. Ice Guest was a little confused. What faith? I don't have faith. I am just like what senior brother said about me. I have no ideas and am easily swayed by others. I was forced to do so. When they rushed, I followed. The old cultivator was speechless. He could only look at the other one. What about you? Do you have faith? Li Peinan gritted his teeth. I am a cultivator, my fate is in my own hands, not the heavens. Yanbo glanced at the little girl beside him. Yes, she is also an old girl now. Xiaoye, are you afraid? Huang Xiaoye nodded honestly. Afraid? I knew that this day would come sooner or later, but I didn't expect it to come so quickly, and in such a way. I was tricked. I've been deceived by a cloudy and misty jade scroll all this time, thinking that I'm participating in some big wave. The sense of accomplishment, the sense of mystery, the sense of mission. Now, it seems that guy was just making random guesses by chance, and he forgot about it after that. As a result, I've been on tenterhooks for hundreds of years. Senior brother, I see that you're not afraid at all. Can you tell me the secret of not being afraid? Yanbo gave a deep smile. That's because you haven't fused the spirit essence into your bones and blood. I, your senior brother, am different. Even if I'm scared, I can pretend that I'm not scared. I can pretend to be calm and collected. He pretended to be duty-bound and not turn back. King came to the Azure Sky sect to look for opportunities in the upper realm. He wasn't here to die. Everyone says that I, your senior martial brother, am indifferent to life and death, but who knows my pain? Forget it. Since I've chosen this path, I can only pretend to the end. Flying at the front were two Xian Yuan perfected lords. The inner sword was Yen Dai, and the outer sword was Yen Tsang. It had to be said that these two women's achievements in the state of mind were far superior to others. Even if they were rushing towards death, it didn't stop them from discussing some trivial matters. Senior sister, your hairpin and Buyao are a bit troublesome in a chaotic battle. I think it's better to use a hairpin to tie it up. It's simple. Azure suits you best. Yen Tseng reminded. Yen Dai nodded. You're right, but I don't like Azure Jade. I like Fendai. Junior sister, your foundation is a bit thick. I don't see you using it usually. Why, is it because this is the last time? Yen Tsang laughed. This is a special foundation. There's only one use, and that's to not leave any bloodstains. I don't want to be floating in the void like a corpse with a bloody face. Yen Dai nodded. You're right. Give me some too. The two of them exchanged make-up questions during battle. After a short silence, Yen Dai asked a question that she had always wanted to ask. How on earth did we force ourselves to this point? Now that I think about it, it's really inconceivable. Yen Tsang pondered for a moment. There seemed to be many reasons. Our own, other people's, the universe's, realities, illusions, intuitions. It seems very coincidental, but when you think about it carefully, it's very inevitable. If that guy didn't go missing here, I think we wouldn't have gathered here. You and Yen Bo wouldn't have come. Little Ice, Kapanan, and the others would have gone to the Fifth Ring long ago. They're now part of the Fifth Ring swordsman army. Yen Dai nodded. That makes sense. We seem to have all fallen into a trap? There were no coincidences in this world. Since everyone was gathered here, there must be a line in the unseen world that subtly influenced their behavior. It made them walk along the line unknowingly and finally walk together. Just like the six of them, there was only one line that they had in common, that unreliable guy. Did the swordsman's charge have to be without hesitation? Not necessarily. At the very least, the 6 people at the front of the charge all had such thoughts. They were unwilling to do so, because young lives still had endless possibilities. They still had many choices, even if they had to flee far away with this group of North Region's last forces. No one died for the sake of dying. This didn't conform to the natural laws of living creatures. But they still charged forward without hesitation. It was difficult to explain all this rationally. Friendship? Belief? Sword heart? Hope? People are human because sometimes they don't even know what they are doing. If there were biographies in the future to record all this, it might be elevated to the height of the Xianyuan spirit and swordsman tradition. But for now, this was actually a helpless, aimless, and pitiful venting. Because of confusion, despair, and perhaps some cowardice, they flew faster and faster. It was as if they couldn't get rid of the negative factors that affected them. After running like this for more than a month, a huge wave of spiritual vigor faintly came from the distance in front of them. That was a huge army advancing with indomitable will like them. There was a feeling of unscrupulousness as they moved unhindered. They were all at least Yuanian grand cultivators, so they had their own experience in judging spiritual vigor. In the two-way confrontation, they could clearly feel that there were at least 2,000 cultivators in the army, and each of them was very powerful. There were hundreds of them, and even the most outstanding monarchs among them were overshadowed by the tyrannical aura of the enemy. It would be an instant annihilation. This was their judgment. The number was 10 times, and the quality was stronger. They realized that this was the last moment, and even the possibility of escaping didn't exist. The shadow of death was close at hand. This made everyone's adrenaline soar. Smokey opened her eyes wide, and the sword box made a long sound. She wanted to see the appearance of these enemies clearly. Smokey narrowed her eyes, and the sword ball in her brain was surging. She didn't care who the enemy was. Yenbo straightened his body even more, and straightened his tall hat that couldn't be any straighter. Huang Xiuya bit her lips and reminded herself that she couldn't lose face for her fellow disciples. The ice gas trembled even more violently, and the frequency was close to losing control. It caused Li Peinan, who was beside him, to tremble as well. Finally, they were killed by this thing. No matter how lucky they were, how could they escape this disaster? Smokey used all her strength. Qianyuan is here! Who wants to fight? Her voice echoed in the universe? Or was it a male voice? It shouldn't be. In the empty universe, when could it cause an echo like a room or a valley? Was it because she was too nervous that her voice cracked? Chapter 1348. It was not Huiying. In front of them, more than 2,000 tyrannical existences brought about boundless killing intent. However, at the forefront of this killing intent was a face that could not be seen. Déjà vu? No, it was unforgettable. Aya! Senior Marshal Sisters! Little E missed you so much! I deserve to die for offending 2 Senior Marshal Sisters. I deserve to die. Lu Xi opened his arms and hugged his 2 senior sisters without any scruples. He even patted and kneaded them passionately, as if he couldn't express the joy of reuniting with them after hundreds of years. This was his only chance. If he missed it, there wouldn't be another one. Lu Xi! You still know to come back after death? After taking a punch and a kick, Lu Xiaoyi pointed behind him. Look, these are my brothers! Whoever dares to touch Qin Kong, I will beat him up until even his mother can't recognize him. A big collision turned into a big meeting. This was something that the 200 daredevils of Qin Kong did not even dare to think about. One was heaven and one was earth, one was death and one was life. They were all old acquaintances. Lu Xi was the bridge. As they flew back, he introduced them to each other. This is Wenji, an old liar. This is Mottled Bamboo, countless people. This is Song Rong, exhibitionist. This is Lu Jun, a little ugly. This is Little Miao, you can play with it as a pet. This is Mo Shui, Long Jian Go Yuan. Well, this is the trashy Taoist of the three pure ones. Let's not talk about this. They were surprised and had many things to say. However, as cultivators, they knew what was most important. After listening to Smokey's introduction, they realized that Qin Kong was in a bad situation. It was the worst situation they had expected, second only to the fact that it had been conquered. Hence, they turned to Qin Xian. If you go back to Nanluo, how much support do you need to gain control? Qin Xian did not hesitate. Give me 100 swordsmen. It's useless for others to go. We have to let them know that Xian Yuan is back. Only then can they work together. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. What do you think of Fangzhong Island? Qin Xian's eyes widened. Give me 10 days. 10 days later, you and I will meet at Fangzhong Island. If you don't set a Buddha seal, then I'll slaughter it. Lu Xiaoyi laughed heartily. That's a good brother. It's you, the three pure ones, who said it. It's not me, Xian Yuan, who wants to sacrifice the flag. Wenji said weakly. Young friend, you've already sacrificed the flag once. Lu Xiaoyi didn't care at all. Then let's do it again. With the war at hand, we cannot allow any internal problems to occur. This is not the time to be soft-hearted. Smokey watched quietly from the side. His former junior brother had always liked to take advantage of him. Now, he had become another person, an ambitious and ruthless character in the universe. The 300 swordsmen under him were like wolves and tigers. The 300 primordial ferocious beasts obeyed his every command, and the 4 unorthodox orthodoxies were obedient to him. 2,000 tigers were on standby. Were all of these things conned? Was that even possible? There was no one to recommend him, and there were also the elders of the sect surrounding him. He gave orders as if there was no one around, laughing and cursing, and no one dared to question him. Of course, the brothers he brought with him were definitely led by him. Even on his own side, senior sister Yan Dai followed him quietly. Smokey's back was straighter, while Huang Xiuya, icy guessed, and Li Peinan turned into traitors at the first moment. They were just short of growing a tail. After the arrangements were made, Lu Xiaoyi gave his 2 senior sisters a bear hug again. Although the 2 of them were prepared and avoided him, they were still thick-skinned. Little E hasn't returned to the Azure Sky Realm for a long time. I miss my hometown and old friends very much. It just so happens that my brothers have never seen the birthplace of the Sword Immortal. Why don't we invite everyone to accompany us and tour the Azure Sky Realm together? With a team of more than 2,000 cultivators, how was this a tour? It was simply a demonstration. They wanted to tell the whole Azure Sky Realm that Xian Yuan was back. Those who had money gave money, and those who had strength gave strength. If they still cowered, they would be beaten up. It might be very rude, it might be very careless, and it might lose the gentlemanly manner of cultivators. But in the current situation, it was the fastest and most effective way to arouse the Azure Sky Realm's desire to resist the invasion. It was very swordsman, and also very Lu Xiaoyi. How could he travel in brocade clothes at night when he had gathered strength and returned with glory? Yanqin put forward her own suggestion. Easy first, then difficult. First Xianyuan, then the plateau, then Shiga, then the East Sea, and after the Thousand Island region, we'll go straight to Fazhang Island. What do you think, little E? Lu Xiaoyi laughed. You're the master here, so you're most familiar with the situation. Just listen to your senior sister. In the northern region, the mortals were still living their normal lives without being aware of it. They and the cultivation world were two different worlds, but the dignitaries among the mortals had already felt the changes in the past few decades. Their cultivators had become reclusive, and they were no longer obsessed with the affairs of the mortal world. This atmosphere was getting more and more serious, so serious that in recent years, almost all the cultivators in the mortal world had disappeared. Most of them had been summoned back to their sex, waiting for the disaster that would befall them at any time. This atmosphere reached its peak when Xianyuan, swordsman, and more than 200 other cultivators rushed out of the universe to find the enemy's main force and fight with their backs to the wall. No one thought that they would succeed, because in this world dominated by cultivation, there were many things that could not be hidden from others. Some were sad, while others were secretly happy. But as cultivators, they did not act blindly without thinking. History had taught them a lot. Xianyuan was not destroyed, but no longer focused on the azure sky realm. So even if they were defeated this time, they could counterattack anytime, anywhere. No one was willing to face the swordsman's revenge. They were just curious as to what kind of power dared to come to the azure sky realm and steal Xianyuan and the three pure ones' tiger skin. The last person who did this was not recorded in history, was it? Even in the northern region, this idea was very popular, not to mention the other continents. The sky was the place they were most concerned about, because all changes would start from there. Perhaps a great war would start at the grand membrane of heaven and earth, or a large number of occupiers would come down. The only thing they complained about was that they did not know what kind of flag to express their feelings. Was it a Tao flag? A Buddhist flag? A beast flag? Or something else strange? Until today, there was finally a change in the sky, a huge change. When more than 2,000 cultivators passed through the grand membrane of heaven and earth at the same time, even the mortal world could feel the great change. Lights and shadows flickered, thunder shook the sky, clouds were torn apart, and strong winds howled. The beasts all hid in their nests with their tails between their legs, trembling in fear. Humans did not have tails to hide in, but they did not dare to hide in their rooms, fearing that the ground would crack. Everyone, regardless of whether they were cultivators or mortals, looked up at the sky, hoping to see something from the rapid changes in the clouds. In history, they actually could not see anything like this. Cultivators would subconsciously avoid showing too much of their cultivation power in the mortal world, but this time, it was different. The clouds surged and were shaken to the point that they were like floating cotton. Groups and clusters of humans and ferocious beasts suddenly appeared in the sky above the northern region, covering the sky and the earth. Countless mortals knelt on the ground. Heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals. Who kidnapped the fairies of the immortal court? Did the immortal send soldiers to settle the score? Chapter 1349. The mortals made countless comical conjectures based on the novels. They began to hide their children, their women, their food, and finally, they hid themselves in the cellars. Only the older ones were left behind because they felt that these ferocious monsters would not like to be bitten by the old ones. But in the eyes of the cultivators, the world had changed. But it seemed that nothing had changed. Because the sharp eyes noticed that the swordsman who once fearlessly faced the enemy, and the 100 or so powerful cultivators of the northern region who followed the battle seemed to be living well and had returned in one piece. Was this a collective mutiny, and they came back to lead the way? At this moment, thousands of people in the sky shouted at the same time. Xianyuan has returned, bless the azure sky! Cultivators of the northern region should strengthen themselves. Gather at Shao Mountain to resist the foreign invaders. The rolling sound waves pierced into everyone's ears without any scruples. Mortals were fine, they just thought that they heard thousands of Lala Mole crickets calling. But when cultivators heard it, the mana in their bodies would resonate. It was like the sound of Zhongming, penetrating their ears, drilling into their brains, shaking their souls. The higher the realm, the more unbearable it was. This group of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals circled the northern region in half a day. No cultivator could avoid the sound waves, no matter what level of secret chamber you were in or how deep the cave you were in, no one could avoid it. Even the zombies deep in the mountains were shaken up. They climbed out of their coffins and jumped a few times, carefully thinking about what they should do. Jing Tsum, who was already anxious, did not fly to Shao Mountain but followed behind the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals. Gradually, they gathered into a stream and became bigger and bigger. The people of the azure sky, especially the people of the northern region, never lacked passion. Otherwise, this place would not be the home of the sword. They were just running away because they were sad about Xian Yuan. When Xian Yuan returned, who would be a coward and be laughed at for the rest of their lives? Half a day later, the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals began to turn towards the northwest. Yuaning of the northern region's powerful cultivators could still keep up, but the remaining Jing Dan could barely keep up. The Foundation establishment cultivators had long lost shadow, but the change in momentum and state of mind was the most important. This kind of call was commonly known as a martial call. It was different from discussing with you in a soft voice. The so-called martial call meant that if you were called, you had to respond and follow. Otherwise, after the battle, it would be time for the entire region to be cleansed. On the Chuanchang Plateau, everything that had happened in the northern region was repeated again. Only a few words were changed, but the effect was the same as in the northern region. The Xianyuan Three Pure Ones were the absolute backbone of the Azure Sky realm. This was the influence of tens of thousands of years. When they left, the hearts of the people in the Azure Sky realm were no longer there. However, as long as they returned, they would be able to regain their confidence. After all, the Azure Sky realm had not truly changed masters. This was a form of encouragement, a form of provocation, a form of inspiration, and a form of coercion. Coercion was not all coercion. In the history of mankind, there were also countless events that were accomplished through coercion, such as the Sirius expedition nearly 20,000 years ago. Don't think that justice doesn't require means. The majority of humans are ordinary people, and it's the same for cultivators. Most people will look at the trend, see which way the wind is leaning, and then follow. After all, those who dare to stand out in the first batch are in the minority. After the Chuanchang Plateau was the Zaijesha region. At this time, the cultivators in the sky were already boundless, multiplying by several times. Of course, there were many Jing Dan mixed in among them. Under someone's intentional connivance, this snowball rolled bigger and bigger. The momentum was astonishing. Anyone who dared to stop it would be crushed into powder by the Azure Sky people who were beginning to become fanatical. Is this good? Many people can actually use a gentler method, and not like this where it's either one or the other. Isn't it too cruel to do that? Yanqing sighed. This junior brother's return was completely different from when he left. In the past, he didn't care about anything and would hide if he could, but now he was arrogant and domineering, full of vigor. Lu Xiaoyi was very firm. We lack time. We don't have enough strength. We also have internal problems. I don't need much, even if you give me another 10 years, I won't use this method. However, our current situation is in the future. Under the great tide, everyone should follow the heavens and respond to this situation. Everyone should have eyes. Usually, we can tolerate their little tempers, but not now. Right now, we're just gathering strength. After that, there will be even more problems of combining these messy cultivators. I'm not familiar with them, so I can only rely on senior sister and you to do it. I'll be at the side as a hatchet man. As soon as you start, I'll shout mighty. Let's get through this first. Yen Dai chuckled. The Azure Sky battlefield is only where the main force is. The probability of us getting through this is very high. Little E, have you ever thought about going to the fifth ring after getting through the Azure Sky battlefield? Lu Xiaoyi nodded. Senior sister, you have great foresight and are righteous and courageous. After this matter, we must go to the fifth ring. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a strong start but a weak finish? Not only do we have to go to the fifth ring, after we're done with it, I also want to bring people to kill our way back to Zhou Xian. Yan Dai smiled. Then attack the Heaven's Choice at the end? Lu Xiaoyi laughed awkwardly. We can't go there. It's too big. I don't want to fight those Heaven's Choice people until they're united. The best way to deal with them is to lure them out. They're dragons at home and worms when they come out. Yanqing looked at the group of cultivators behind them. Little E, most of these friends are from Heaven's Choice, right? I understand. As long as we defeat Heaven's Choice outside and let these people go back. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. This is just a vision. Heaven's Choice is so big, but they can't even unite now, let alone in the future. The universe's environment will only become more and more chaotic in the future. We shouldn't just call them Heaven's Choice. There are many Heaven's Choice. There are Heaven's Choice Taoists, Heaven's Choice Buddhists, and Heaven's Choice neutral sects. Heaven's Choice has small and medium-sized forces, close to 10,000 countries, and countless ravines. There's no need to fight. You just need to watch from the side, and they'll naturally split into countless. Yanqing sighed. The premise is that we have to get through this. If Heaven's Choice gets the final victory, the Heaven's Choice continent will be like they're on steroids. Danger will unite them, and victory will also unite them. Lu Xiaoyi gave a thumbs up. My two senior sisters are wise and powerful. You have great foresight and are able to see through everything. I'm ashamed of my inferiority. How about this? When will you find a chance to teach me a few moves alone? Yanqing glanced at him. Tell me, how many senior sisters did you get to know in Zhou Xian? Lu Xiaoyi cried out in grievance and pointed behind him. Senior sister, if you don't believe me, you can ask these guys behind me. Am I a model of cleanliness in Zhou Xian? I have no junior sisters, no senior sisters, and no master's wife. Yan Dai played it down, but her words were still heard by all the swordsmen. Junior sister, and I probably still have some say in Xianyuan. We also have the right to make suggestions regarding Xuanyuan's entry level, swordsmanship, inheritance, and so on. However, Xianyuan needs honest people. Some swordsmen were moved. Chapter 1350. The snowball rolled from the northern region to the Chuanshan Plateau, and then rolled to the western Geshe state. This was the base of the Tai Heavenly Sect and the Shangqing Temple. It had a deep relationship with the Xianyuan. Once summoned, they responded immediately. From this, it could be seen that Yanqing had a deep understanding of the Qing Sky cultivators. The smoothness of the north region and the west region of the Azure Sky sects, four great prefectures, immediately caused the snowball to roll to an astonishing scale. With the participation of those gold core cultivators, the scale of the snowball went straight to 10,000. Thus, when they flew to the eastern sea in a mighty manner, no one dared to oppose them openly or secretly. In order to protect the Azure Sky sect, they took advantage of this situation and rose up. At this point, the general trend was set and could not be stopped. Are we still going to Nanluo? Yanqing asked. She was a little worried about Qin Xian. Although she came from the Three Pristines, she was from the Shangqing Temple. If she went to Nanluo to command the Taiqi Yuqing, she might not be able to complete the task. Lu Xiaoyi said matter-of-factly. Go! Why not? Qin Xian is just going to be the vanguard. The key is to let everyone see the unity of the Qing Sky cultivators. If not, some timid people will never dare to stand out. He knew Yanqing's scruples. She was afraid of damaging Qin Xian's reputation. However, his senior sister did not understand the relationship between them. After 600 years of friendship, they had a deep understanding of each other. Qin Xian was also not a shallow person. If he went to Dafa State, it was obvious that he was going to slap his friend's face. Perhaps Qin Xian herself had a premonition. Being alone in a distant region for 600 years, she was not that weak. In Nanluo and Ningzhou, Qin Xian was very supportive. She had gained the trust of the remaining cultivators of the Taiqi Yuqing. However, to spread this trust to all the sects in Nanluo, It would take time. He was a little regretful that he had boasted in front of Lu Xiaoyi. Now was not the time to fight over personal feelings. Time was very important to them. But he wasn't worried, because with his understanding of that guy, he was arrogant. How could his grandson not come to Nanluo to show off? South Liaoning province was the largest Taoist gathering place in the Blue Sky continent. Under the joint summons of Xuanyuan's army and the Three Pure Ones, no cultivator dared to ignore them. It was not only for the sake of power, but also for the sake of their homeland. No matter how one looked at it, under the current circumstances, it was the stupidest and most shameful thing to do. If everyone gathered together, they would have a much greater chance of defeating the invading enemy. After the South Civ was the Thousand Islands region, a paradise for rogue cultivators. The reason why it was later was purely because of the distance. Needless to say, rogue cultivators were always the best group of people to join in on the fun. However, that was not what they were thinking about now. Qing Xian suggested. As the descendant of the Three Pristines, he had the foresight of his predecessors. 2 directions. Fangzhang Island? Or the Deep Sea? Fangzhang Island was the base of the Diju Temple. The Deep Sea was the gathering place of the high-level sea beasts of the Blue Sky continent. This was also a cultivation force that could not be ignored in the Blue Sky continent. There were even sea beasts of the Yang spirit level among them, but for tens of thousands of years, they rarely showed themselves and only moved about in the endless sea. They were a very peaceful group of beasts that had always lived in harmony with humans. Smokey asked politely. Senior brother Qing Xian, what do you think? Qing Xian said. I think it's more appropriate to go to the deep sea first, because it's closer, and because they are also one of the masters of the Blue Sky continent. We shouldn't leave them behind in this kind of realm war. It's also a form of respect. The 2 female cultivators felt that it was very reasonable. Lu Xiaoyi curled his lips and went on to a deeper level of interpretation. What he actually means is to pull in the deep-sea beasts. If we can fight with the great Buddhas of the Diju Temple, then we can wash the Fangzhang Island with blood. You two have to be careful. Don't be fooled by this Taoist's appearance. His heart is black. He eats people without spitting out the bones. Qing Xian laughed dryly. He could hide his thoughts from everyone, but he could not hide it from this guy, just like how this guy could not hide it from him. Smokey frowned slightly. Little E, that's not good, right? We don't have any evidence. Such a big orthodoxy, internal strife before an external war. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Technically, it's not difficult. Actually, I also love peace and have no prejudice against Buddhism. But Qing Xian is my brother. If he insists, I can't go against him too much. Qing Xian cursed in his heart. Damn it, he's talking about brothers now? He was trying to shift the blame. But he was unwavering in his actions. He could also see that Lu Xiaoyi had a big penis for these 2 senior sisters. He was also a lower body animal. He needed to explain a little. There's no need for evidence. The fact that the Diju Temple has not made a sound until now is abnormal in itself. In the Blue Sky Great World, there have been 3 pillars since ancient times, Xianyuan, the 3 Pure Ones, and the Diju Temple. More of our sects went to the 5th ring, but the strength of the Diju Temple in Blue Sky is stronger than ours. As the only pillar of Blue Sky in this crisis, why are they playing dead and not making a sound? What's the reason? Is this a complete separation of Blue Sky? They don't think of themselves as Blue Sky people. They only admit to being Buddhist disciples. They don't even pretend. What do you think it's for? Smokey and Smokey Mayday still did not understand. It was not that they were stupid, but that they were not like those 2 fellows who lived in a foreign land of mutual deception. Qing Xian sneered. At the very least, you can put on an act and lead everyone to resist a little before surrendering? At the very least, you can gain the respect of all of Blue Sky and lay a good foundation for the spread of Buddhism in the future. How can Buddhism give up such an opportunity to win people's hearts? If they don't do it, there's only one possibility. The 2 girls widened their eyes. Lu Xie sighed. They still lacked experience. Qin Xian said word by word. There's only one possibility. The ones who are about to invade Blue Sky are also Buddhist forces. So it's meaningless whether they pretend or not. If they pretend, they'll look even more hypocritical. So they might as well be cowards. They know very well who are coming. Even their own temple of Deju Zen Temple will be among them. So I said there's no room for discussion. I'm not the only one who thinks this. Your Lu Xiaoyi has long wanted to sacrifice a monk as a sacrifice. At the very least, I can still find a few excuses to justify my actions. This guy can't even be bothered to think of a reason. Otherwise, why do you think he's gathering so many people to walk around Blue Sky to build momentum? It's to make an example out of them. Under the bloodshed, no one will dare to be disloyal. Lu Xiaoyi widened his eyes innocently. I have such thoughts? Why don't I know about it? Smokey and Smoky Mayday looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The two of them thought that they were at the most outstanding level among the current generation of Xianyuan cultivators. In their actions, they also faintly had the demeanor of a big family. However, in front of a real hero, the two of them were still too inexperienced. The difference in all aspects was not only in their strength, but also in their tactics and even more so in their ruthlessness. The universe was collapsing and demons were appearing frequently. Fortunately, these two were on the same side. Chapter 1351. The center of the deep sea was a place where humans rarely set foot in. It was not because they did not have the ability to come, but because they respected the deep sea monsters. If they did not go to the land, they would not come to the deep sea. However, on this day, the sky above the deep sea was almost filled with human cultivators. They were densely packed like black clouds. Although they didn't threaten the sea beasts like they did on the continent, the pressure of tens of thousands of cultivators was enough to make the sea beasts restless. Of course, they knew why the humans were here. Tens of thousands of cultivators stood quietly, but the psychological pressure caused by them was not something that the sea monsters could ignore. Cut themselves off from the blue sky. Cut themselves off from the humans? How was that possible? A huge single-horned blue whale floated to the surface of the sea, indifferent to the pressure of tens of thousands of human cultivators. Its body had already surpassed the treasured ship they once owned. In its perception, the humans were not scary, but the 300 Archean fierce beasts higher up were terrifying. That was the suppression of the bloodline, engraved in the depths of the soul. There was no bargaining. This was not the style of a sun-god-level emperor of the sea monsters. The sea race will gather all the elites and fight against the foreign invaders with the humans. But we will not participate in the disputes between the humans and the blue sky. It was expected. This was the power. The deep-sea beasts knew very well that even if there were invaders from other regions, they would never infringe on the interests of the sea beasts for no reason after entering Blue Sky continent. Therefore, they naturally defined this war as a war between humans. To them, they had the advantage of advancing and retreating freely. If the three pure ones led by Xianyuan took the lead, they would certainly follow. If no one led them, they would certainly shrink back in the deep sea, and there was no need to clean up the mess for the humans. Therefore, when Lu Xiaoyi came with the power, it was only natural for them to take action. In fact, attracting the sea monsters was more of a symbolic move. In the cultivation world, among the various creatures of the same realm, the achievements and strength of humans were obviously higher than other races. Among the monsters, the strength of the Archean beasts was higher than that of the realm beasts. In addition, the sea monsters were the cornerstone of their survival. Their abilities would be further reduced if they left the sea. Therefore, Lu Xiaoyi did not expect too much of their combat power in the universe. Letting the sea beasts fight in the void of the universe was like letting the void beasts fight in the deep sea. Very few cultivators were like humans, who could ignore the difference in environment. The team, which had swelled up once again, began to gallop across the sky. The cultivators from the various continents who had joined the team gradually understood why their final destination was the Fa Zhang Island. This was something that Qin Xian purposely allowed the Taoists to spread. The crafty Taoists were much more skilled than the swordsmen when it came to such matters. Moreover, they had many more friends. His goal was to create public opinion. A public opinion that was favorable to their actions. The public opinion was that the Dezhu Zen temple had betrayed Qin Kong. Otherwise, if he suddenly made a move, it would cause chaos among the huge group of cultivators, and cause them to have different thoughts. He had to admit that the ox-noses were very good at this. It was their specialty. It was also because of his inappropriate behavior in the Dezhu Zen temple, and also because of the fundamental differences between Taoism and Buddhism. For tens of thousands of years, there had never been such a good opportunity. With the survival of the domain at stake, the Taoists keenly grasped the loophole of the Buddhist sect. If he didn't destroy it now, when would he? On the Fanzhang Island, the monk army was orderly. Taoism was such a big scene. Tens of thousands of cultivators had circled the entire Qin Kong. If the Dezhu Zen temple still didn't know what was waiting for them, then it would really be a disgrace to their reputation of tens of thousands of years of inheritance. Annihilating a sect was not a decision that ordinary people could make. In the Xianyuan sword sect, this was something that the chaotic Thunder Palace and the Sword or a Rushing Heaven Pavilion could not decide on their own. This was because the opponent was not an ordinary Buddhist sect, but a Tao tradition with a longer history than Xianyuan. This required the approval of the Sun God Perfected Lord. But now, under the command of the two Yin gods who had returned, it was brazenly happening. Xiaoyi? Yan Chen was a little worried. Lu Shi smiled slightly. Taking advantage of the time when Qin Xian went to the rear to organize and spread the rumors, he explained to his confidant beside him. There are 3 reasons. Think about it, am I right? First, when the army is in a battle, the most important thing to avoid is the instability of the army's morale. I'm the commander. I can't let more people be in danger because of my soft-heartedness. This is not the time to be indecisive. Second, this is the idea of the 3 pure ones. Let's push it away as much as possible. Don't be embarrassed. Do you know why Qin Xian didn't deny it? This is him proving his value. I pulled the team together, so he has to shoulder the responsibility. The 2 of us are going to Zhou Xian together. Each of us has our own responsibilities. How can we favor one and discriminate against the other? Lastly, regarding the sect, don't worry. Don't you know the nature of our Xianyuan? If we win the battle, we don't need to explain anything. If we lose the battle, I won't be able to explain myself even if I have 100 mouths. Fourth, I've already given the monks a chance. A big circle around the sky is enough for them to pass through the macromembrane 100 times. If they are still waiting here to play with integrity, such an enemy is very scary. I'm timid and afraid of trouble. I don't care about scary enemies. A dead monk is still a good monk. Yan Qin and Yan Dai were speechless. With such a scheming mind, if the monks ran away, they would be labeled as traitors. If they didn't have the courage to confront them, they would be ordinary people. If they ran away, they would lose their hearts. Lu Xiaoyi was playing with a false victory. If they didn't run, Lu Xiaoyi would benefit from a bloodbath on Fanzhang Island. He wouldn't lose out no matter what. However, little Miao keenly pointed out his loophole. Senior brother, it's 4. Why have you become like mottled bamboo now? Can't you count? Before they even flew to Fanzhang Island, they already knew that the monks had chosen to persist. Little E. There might be a Yang God Perfected Lord in Dezhu Temple. It's quite troublesome. Yan Dai reminded him. There were always restrictions in a battle between cultivators. Many of them weren't explicitly stated, but they were engraved in every cultivator's heart. For example, the slaughter of the Buddhas this time should be an internal affair of Qin Kong. In theory, it should be done by Qin Kong's own people. Just from strength alone, there were many young god-level beasts among the immemorial beasts. Even if one couldn't defeat a human great Buddha, a few more would be enough. However, if they did this, it would create some negative influence in the crowd of cultivators who were watching. They would feel that the Xianyuan swordsman was nothing more than this. Qin Kong had to invite outsiders to help when enforcing the family rules. Lu Xiaoyi didn't care, but Xianyuan did. Originally, it was an idea to have the deep-sea beast suppress the great Buddha of Diju Temple. This was also the deep-seated reason why Qin Xian went to the deep sea first. However, the single-horned blue whale was cunning and intelligent. The moment it opened its mouth, it said that it wouldn't participate in the grievances between humans. The little fox hit a wall with the old fox. This was why Yen Dai was worried now. To kill a young god-level great Buddha, who knew how many people would have to die. The key was that under the watchful eyes of so many people, you couldn't kill too slowly. Lu Xiaoyi said softly, "It's okay, I'm here." Chapter 1352. On the island of Fanzhang, 1,000 monks who were above the level of Arhat were facing off in the temple. The 10,000 feet Buddha looked at the cultivators pressing down from the sky. It would be a lie to say that he was not worried. It was not a matter of his own safety, but the disciples under him. He had thought of sending the excellent Buddhist seeds away, but he was unanimously rejected by the monks. Swordsman had the heart of the sword, Taoist had the heart of the Tao, and Buddhist had the heart of the Buddha. He was proud, but also ashamed. To be honest, he was under a lot of pressure. According to the plan, they only needed to wait quietly in the green sky. They did not arrange for them to be spies and create chaos in the green sky. This was the Buddhist sect's confidence in their offensive power. It was also the result of the green sky becoming an empty region. They did not have a battle mission. This was an open and above-board invasion of external forces. But now, trouble was coming. Xianyuan had brought in a group of reinforcements from somewhere. The composition of the reinforcements was complicated, and he still did not fully understand their origins. There were swordsmen, other Taoist orthodoxies, and even Archean fierce beasts. The Archean fierce beasts of Heaven's Choice had taken sides? But no one told them this. He did not arrange for a large-scale evacuation, because these uninvited guests had already sealed the Hong membrane when they entered the blue sky. If they dared to break in, they would immediately be treated as traitors and beaten up, without even a chance to defend themselves. It was better to wait on the island of Fazhang. At least, they did not have conclusive evidence to prove that Diju Temple was in cahoots with foreign invaders. There was no good way to deal with the current situation. Diju Temple's forces in the blue sky were stronger than Xuanyuan's 3 pristines. This was a fact, but this strength was only relative. It did not mean that Diju Temple's main force was in the blue sky, so the difference in numbers was like heaven and earth. He could only delay, using his strength as a great Buddha to delay as much time as possible. The formation defense in the temple was very complete, but that referred to opponents of the same level, not the whole group of cultivators in the blue sky. 20,000 cultivators, 1 spell each, the formation of the mountain gate could not withstand it. This was an unchangeable fact. Thousands of monks stayed in the formation, and only he stood in front of the formation. This was a necessary risk, and for a human great Buddha at the level of Yang spirit, it was his responsibility. He was waiting for the other party to denounce him. In terms of eloquence, this was his strength. He didn't know how long he could drag it out, but his goal wasn't to change the views of Xuanyuan's 3 pure ones. After tens of thousands of years of living together, there were deep grudges between them. There was no possibility of easing the tension and letting go. His goal was the followers. After observing for a few days, he finally understood some key points. Aside from the hundreds of Yuanying and Xianyuan, the 3 pure ones were the last remaining forces left behind. Most of the people here were still just onlookers. They could not say that they were fighting for it, but they could question it and create a barrier. This was the only chance for the Diju Zen temple. That was why he was hovering outside the formation. That was why he was not afraid of facing more than 10,000 cultivators by himself. He was trying to find out who was the true leader among the countless cultivators. He should be among the swordsmen. He focused his attention on the limited number of swordsmen's primordial spirits. He was unfamiliar with them, so he couldn't make a judgment at the moment. Lu Xiaoyi nodded at Qin Xian. Both of them had a tacit understanding in this aspect. Talking before the battle? They did not have the time for that. Everyone had rushed here and spent a lot of effort to gather here. They were not here to listen to others' arguments, and to use time to dissolve their momentum. It was not difficult to understand the logic of a drum to build up the spirit, then it would weaken and then it would be exhausted by the third. Breaking formations was the Taoist sect's specialty. Although the Buddhist sect was not weak, there were too few people guarding the formation. There were more than 1,000 monks. After excluding the Luohan, there were only about 100 bodhisattvas and Buddhas. How could they be compared to the thousands of Taoists in the sky? As long as they were organized properly, it was only a matter of attacking a few times. Under his command, the Taoists of Qing Kong, under the coordination of the Taiqing, Yuqing, and Shangqing old fellows, had already coordinated the level of attack before they arrived at Fanzhang Island. They lined up in the sky above the Dezhu Zen temple. The 10,000 feet tall Buddha was still waiting for the opponent's leader to come out and confront him, but the Taoists in the sky had already finished preparing their spells. In the next moment, the spells of all the Qing Kong cultivators at the same time, with the same Tao state, regardless of whether they were strong or weak, had already landed on the Taoists. Killing without teaching? Even if he had a good Buddha nature, he could not stop a surge of anger from surging up. The Taoists had gone too far and were unreasonable. They caused his plan to fail and die in the womb. The key was that with 10 or 20,000 Taoists, he could not even capture the leader first to catch the bandits. He did not know which Taoist he should attack, which group of Taoists. However, anger was anger. Although the Taoist's thunderous attack had put the great formation in jeopardy, it had also allowed him to see some clues. The 300 immemorial beasts did not attack. The swordsman group did not attack. The few orthodoxies who were obviously not of Qing Kong's origin did not attack either. The deep-sea beasts did not attack either. This was an opportunity. This meant that there was no sun god among the group of cultivators who attacked him. The immemorial beasts and sea beasts did not attack, which meant that they were abiding by the unwritten rules of the cultivation world. The swordsmen and those strange orthodoxies did not attack, which meant that they were waiting for him, the great Buddha, to make his final struggle. Counterattack? It would not be effective. Fighting against 10,000 alone was a joke even to the sun god. In an instant, the 10,000 feet tall Buddha made a decision. Under the coordination of the three Pure One's cultivators, the Taoists quickly launched a second attack. With this kind of strength, the great formation would collapse in 3 or 4 attacks. However, their second attack did not achieve their expected goal, because the 10,000 feet tall Buddha swore to replace him. If I don't go to hell, who will? In Buddhism, it was not just a slogan. They also had a similar Buddhist technique, which was called the mercy of the Buddha. With one strength, they supported the defense of the entire mountain gate, which was a method to infinitely transfer the power of the attack. Of course, only the great Buddha could bear such a burden, because every time he overloaded himself, the monk would die as the price. The great Buddha of the Sun God realm could be reborn. The great formation of the great Enlightenment Zen temple did not move at all, but the 10,000 feet tall Buddha sacrificed himself and was reborn in nirvana. The power of the Sun God was amazing. The Taoist spells were merciless. In a battle of Tao, they would not be soft-hearted. Under the command of the three Pure Ones, the spells fell in waves. Amidst the thunderous Sanskrit chants of the monks, the 10,000 feet tall Buddhas were reborn again and again, creating a tragic scene. He was pretending to be bitter. This was the joint judgment of Lu Xiaoyi and Qin Xian. If this kind of bitterness continued, it would affect the perception of many cultivators. They would not start to sympathize with the monks, but it would give Buddhism a chance to defend itself. Once this kind of defense began, how could it be clear when to stop? Could it be that 1 or 20,000 people would accompany him like this? Until the foreign attack of Buddhism came? Chapter 1353. Wanzhang's bitterness was not unsolvable. As long as the primordial beasts and seed beasts were willing to join in, or the Taoists could rush forward, they could kill the old master with random punches. However, doing so would cause the Qing Kong sect to feel defeated psychologically, which would affect the effect of this flag sacrifice. This was the goal that Wanzhang wanted to achieve. In a situation where he was outnumbered, this was the only way for him to gain the upper hand. Even if he had to die, he wanted to destroy the Blue Sky sect's morale in defending their homeland. Lu Xiui stared at the Buddha and did not speak. Qin Xian's expression was normal as he waved his hand to signal for the attack to continue. Both of them had the same indomitable character. They would never be swayed by the bitterness of the Buddha. Wen Ji advised, "Why don't we stop first? This is not the way of a cultivator." This time, there was no need for Lu Xi to speak. Yan Cheng explained, "This is the battle between Taoists and Buddhists. We have the advantage of numbers. With the power in hand, we can protect the world. Buddhism relies on the profound realm of the great Buddha. What can you do to us? Either this Buddha will continue to resist like this. Otherwise, someone from our side will launch a surprise attack and succeed in killing him. This is also a way to fight. This is the best way for the Deju Zen temple to deal with the current situation. I have to admit that the great Buddha is indeed amazing. However, this also means that the Deju Zen temple will definitely have a share of the enemies from the Qing Kong sect. It's a pity that Yan Qing is useless and cannot see through the monk's past and future. There is a sword in his heart, but he cannot slash it out. What can he do?" Wen Ji sighed inwardly. If they were not a family, they would not enter the same house. It was impossible to count on these sword cultivators to be kind. It seemed that in this batch of people chosen by heaven, there was no one who was kind. Lu Xi closed his eyes as the past and future of Wanzhang appeared in his heart. This would be his first time slaying the sun spirit. He could not mess it up in front of everyone. Not only would he embarrass himself, but he would also embarrass Xian Yuan. Up until now, the 10,000 feet Buddha had been reborn 5 times. 3 of them were reborn from the past, and 2 of them were reborn from the vision of the future. This was also a major characteristic of the rebirth of the young spirit. They would not hold on to a certain base point and use it frequently. This was also a method that was often used to prevent others from seeing through their past and future. He had seen plenty of great Buddhas slain in the sword Dao steel. Among the 5 seniors, the one who had slain the most Buddhas was not the Crow ancestor, but Chong Lu. The Crow ancestor still killed most of the young spirits of Taoism, which was also in line with the strength comparison between Taoism and Buddhism. It was very balanced, and there was no preference. Lu Zhu was different. Out of the 11 scenes, 8 of them were targeted at Buddhas. There was even one more than Crow ancestor. What was the reason for that? He had an advantage over Crow ancestor and building ancestor when it came to observing Buddha's past and future. This was because he understood merit and impermanence. These were the mainstream of Buddhism's Tao realm. His immersion in it was not inferior to that of orthodox monks. In fact, he even surpassed them in some aspects. This was because he stood in a more detached position to look at Buddhism's Tao realm, but he did not indulge in it. The so-called bystander saw more clearly was the truth. He had already seen the future of Wanzhang clearly. This was also a common phenomenon for young spirit cultivators. The future was better than the past. This was because the yang spirit realm was almost impossible to change. It was the accumulation of thousands of years of hard work. How could it be changed just like that? He could only move forward in the current direction. With a general direction, coupled with his understanding of merit and impermanence, he was confident that he could find it accurately after the second rebirth with the future as the base point. The past was much more troublesome because there were too many choices in the past. Without the guidance of the Tao realm, it could be a Buddhist disciple, a mortal, or even a Taoist. The 3 rebirths with the past as the base point allowed him to lock on to the past of one on. 2 mortal lives, 1 Taoist journey. What he needed to do now was to find the base point in these 3 pasts. In the mortal world, he was a devout pilgrim in the mortal world. He served Buddha devoutly all his life until his death. Although it was very ordinary and there were no twists and turns, it was very in line with Wanzhong's performance at this time. He was merciful and had no regrets. The past, present, and future had some kind of connection. In the depths of his soul, in the unseen world, it was like Lu Xiaoyi's belief. Even if he was not very willing in the present world, he could not escape the fetters of the past. In the other mortal life, he was a scholar. After passing the imperial examination and stepping into the official career, he was in a high position and looked down on all living things. In his later years, he saw through the mortal world and thoroughly understood the ugliness of the world. In the end, he left and relied on Buddhism, accompanied by a green lamp, and achieved great enlightenment. This was also very in line with Wanzhong's current state of mind. The only Taoist journey was when he reached the foundation establishment realm. He was free and unfettered in the mortal world. He slept with flowers and was not afraid of wind or rain, looking at the green mountains at the bow of the boat. In the end, he was killed in a collision with Buddhism. Wanzhong had a lot of past, most of which existed to cover up. Lu Xie could pick out these 3 parts because he was standing on the shoulders of giants, in addition to his own judgment. For others, they did not have any experience in this area. They did not understand the law of 3 lives, nor did they have the demonstration of predecessors, nor did they have the foundation of Buddhism. Therefore, the cultivators in the sky were fascinated and unable to extricate themselves. Not to mention picking out 3 parts, they could not even pick out the right part of the 30 parts. However, the last 3 parts were also a kind of test for Lu Xiaoyi. He already had no means to screen. Picking one out of the 3 parts, the possibility of failure was very high. Among these 3 parts of the past, which part had more in common with Wanzhong now? Was it ordinary? Was it sudden repentance? Or was it a resolute change of Taoism and Buddhism? Carefully recalling Wanzhong's comprehensive performance under the pressure of the Qin Kong cultivator army, analyzing why he took the place of the formation and why he had been enduring, he slowly understood some of the persistence of this Buddha's soul. Was it a deep-rooted hatred towards Taoism? No. Was it an epiphany type of killing to become Buddha? That's not it either. It was ordinary. Persistence in the ordinary. It might not be a storm, but it was continuous. It was that ordinary pilgrim. After a lifetime of burning incense, he did not enter Buddhism, nor did he save the common people. He only did what he thought he should do. After thinking it through, Lu Xiaoyi did not hesitate anymore. Suddenly, a sword river hung upside down in the sky and rolled over. Wanzhong's expression was calm. He knew that this was the core of the swordsman group attacking him. It was in accordance with the rules of the Qin Kong world of cultivation. They did not attack him with numbers, so he had to resist this sword. This was a fair exchange. There was nothing inappropriate about it. The rolling sword river gathered into a sword and slashed down on his head. At the same time, another 2 sword gleams entered the underworld. The entire space became quiet. How many cultivators had experienced the severing of 3 lives in their lifetime? They were all legends, but now, it was right in front of their eyes. The sword gleams penetrated. Wanzhong sat down cross-legged and let out a long sigh. In the sky, Tao disappeared and formed. There was also the sorrow of the Buddhist voice in the mountain gate. Chapter 1354. The Taoists were like wolves and tigers, pouncing down. The biggest massacre ever since the formation of the Qin Kong cultivation world took place. The flag sacrifice this time was so bloody that the vast ocean was devoid of light. No one above the level of bhikkhu was spared. Someone brought up the order to kill Buddha, what do you think? Qin Xian found Lu Xiui. At this moment, he completely regarded this former comrade as the leader of the army, because he couldn't kill Sanxing with a single strike. Lu Xiui shook his head. In my opinion, it's not good to expand. The crime of betraying the Qin Kong cultivation world should be known to the world. Qin Xian nodded, he thought so too. There were many reasons, but the timing was not right. Once it was expanded, the Qin Kong cultivation world would not have peace for at least a few decades. In the context of foreign enemies, this was not a good choice. Moreover, there was no change in the trend of the coexistence of Taoism and Buddhism in the universe. As one of the starting points of the universe's chaos, it was not a good idea to do this as the cause and effect was too great. The blood sacrifice made the cultivators very excited. Under the instructions of the leaders, the cultivators of the Qin Kong cultivation world gathered and divided into groups in the sky above the Fujian Island. Due to the urgency of the situation, it was impossible to form an army system, but it was also impossible for each small orthodoxy to act on their own. With the agreement of many parties, it was finally decided to divide into groups. The 6 prefectures of the Qin Kong cultivation world, the sea beasts and Lu Xiaoyi's direct subordinates, made up a total of 8 cultivator armies. Excluding the Jin Dan cultivators who came to join in the fun, there were actually 4,000 Yaning perfected cultivators. This was almost all of the Qin Kong cultivation world. It was a little pitiful. Such a scale was only equivalent to the upper sect of Zhou Xian, not even comparable to the upper sect of Tianzhu. Considering that the main body of the strongest sects in the Qin Kong cultivation world was in the 5th ring, such a scale was barely satisfactory. There was a mix of good and bad, but under the current situation, they couldn't care less. Qin Xian was very straightforward. These people, they can knock on the corners and fight battles that go smoothly, but it's hard to say how long they can last under adversity. After all, they are only slightly stronger than a mob, they are not directly under the power of a big sect like ours. Therefore, the people you brought back from Tianzhu are still the decisive force. If you win, everyone will want to show off. If you lose, everyone will leave. The only thing I can help you with is to chase these guys away. As for how much strength I can contribute, that's not within the scope of my abilities. Lu Xiaoyi patted him on the shoulder. The two of us, ever since we went to the Immortal of Zhou, have been grasshoppers on the same line. Neither of us can run away. He had fought for his life for hundreds of years. He couldn't let it be destroyed at the last moment, right? Of course I will do my best. I also believe that you'll do your best. But those guys, they've already used the dirty tricks of the 3 pure ones. What's there to hide? Roping in, rewarding, making a wish, deceiving, luring. Brother, I think highly of you. The gathering on the island of Fangzhong was decided. Everyone would return to the continents to settle their affairs and prepare for battle. Where are the resources hidden? Who would the position be passed to? How should he balance the number of wives? What was the difference between a legitimate son and an illegitimate son? No one dared to say that they would definitely be able to return from a cosmic war. There were too many coincidences. Fortunately, there were some who took the lead. With the lesson learned from the Diju Temple, there was a little bit of self-awareness to protect the realm. The entire realm, from top to bottom, was united in life and death, sharing weal and woe. This was a false proposition. Without a plan, without using any tricks, it was impossible to make the cultivators of an entire realm contribute like you. Because when you were in Xianyuan, the 3 pure ones in Tai, you didn't share a single spiritual stone with others. Shao Mountain was now bustling with activity. The remaining swordsmen brought the curious guests from Tianzhu to tour this legendary mountain. Legendary people. Especially the swordsmen, they had a feeling of pilgrimage as they admired this city of sword immortals. They listened to the stories of every legend and paid attention to every legendary person. Xianyuan the Great, Wen Guang, Wei Ji, Ancestor Crow, the 3 Qins, Chong Lu, Wu Shixing. Zong's sword, E-sword, Killing sword, Dao sword, Star sword. Just some of the superficial things were enough to captivate the swordsmen. This was the power of a system. If they could learn systematically here, it would be easy for their swordsmanship to reach a higher level in the future. In fact, Lu Xiaoyi had never heard of many legendary stories. But he had to force himself to maintain the posture of an experienced person. On a lonely peak, two people stood side by side. Are you confident about the early warning of the sentries outside the universe? Lu Xiaoyi was a little worried. Because of the uncertainty of the arrival time of the enemy, they couldn't keep everyone in one place. It would take about half a day to gather people after receiving the warning. Yan Cheng was very confident. Little E, don't worry. In the left Zhou, invaders are invaders. Most of them are loyal to Qin Kong. Although we can't help, it's not a problem to send a message. I've already made the arrangements. We'll be able to get the message half a month away. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. I'm not worried about senior sister's work. But the sect seems to have handled the crisis of Qin Kong a little too carelessly. I came back this time to help on the sidelines, but I didn't expect to become the main force. Yan Cheng explained. The pressure of the fifth ring is great. The three pure ones and Tai have already withdrawn, leaving us with no choice. It's impossible to fight on two fronts. Other than giving up on Qin Kong, what else can we do? Lu Xiaoyi smiled, but he didn't think much of it. What do you mean by no choice? Where there's a will, there's a way. At least 10 years of preparation time. Can't a few sects work together to unify Qin Kong? Cut off the tumor that was the Great Enlightenment Temple in advance? Contact the other regions in the left Zhou and promise them benefits to form an alliance. As long as the enemy wasn't the main force, they could resist for a while. Why did they have to give Qin Kong away? Or was it because of their wishful thinking? However, this wasn't something he should be thinking about, so he changed the topic. Have the enemies of the fifth ring been confirmed? Are they very powerful? Yan Cheng's expression was grim. 3 have been confirmed. The main force of the Buddhist sects. They're also the instigators of this war. The Heaven's Choice Buddhist sect is only a part of it. The Buddhist sects of the main world have been secretly moving towards the fifth ring. We've been too focused on the planets that have been plundered, and not enough on the Buddhist sections. Or rather, we've been paying attention, but we haven't taken it to heart. I heard that the higher-ups of the fifth ring also have a plan to deal with the Buddhist sects of the main world, but because the targets are too scattered, they haven't had the time to implement it. Zerg. The number is unknown. However, senior brothers estimate that there will be at least 3 extremely large insect swarms. Their existence is fatal to the fifth ring without the world macromembrane, so we have to arrange a large number of cultivators to be on standby. This is also the reason why we have to transfer Qin Kong's forces back to the fifth ring. Not only Qin Kong, but all the fifth ring forces are transferring people from the mother planet. The fifth ring has expanded a lot compared to normal. Lastly, there are immemorial sacred beasts. This is just a guess, but senior brothers say that the possibility is very high. Chapter 1355. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. If he were in charge of Xianyuan, he would also be in a dilemma. Moreover, were there really only 3 groups? He complained. I'm curious. The fifth ring cultivators have dominated the universe for tens of thousands of years, but they're all enemies? No friends? A war like this should be a clash between groups, but you insisted on fighting alone. It would be strange if you didn't suffer. Smokey was silent for a long time before he said, Character determines fate. The fifth ring cultivators are too proud, so proud that they think they can deal with any possible problem. Attack and defense are also one aspect. The difference between being active and passive is too big. The universe is vast, and you can't pull a group of allies to your own realm to wait for an attack that you don't know when it will come. You can't wait for your father to come and wait for your son to come, right? Lastly, the Crow ancestor pushed down the first domino, which affected the interests of many people with vested interests. This is just a concentrated outbreak. This is human nature. Under change, those who have lost interests will be eager to jump out, while those who have hopes of gaining benefits will want to keep a low profile. To wear the crown, one must bear its weight. To lead a new era, this was the price that the fifth ring cultivators and Zhou Xian had to pay. Smoky was also helpless. Of course we have allies, but at least we have to survive the first wave of the enemy's attack. Only then can we wait for reinforcements. Or maybe we can win this war and rise up. When the time comes, you'll see countless people bootlicker. Smoky's tone was actually filled with dissatisfaction. It was not dissatisfaction with the sect, but with the cultivation world. Little E, how do you plan to fight this war? Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Senior sister is my role model. Smoky was speechless. Be serious. Many people's lives are at stake. Lu Xiaoyi spread his hands. I'm very serious. I'll learn from you and take the initiative to attack, directly defeating them in a face-to-face battle. As long as the enemy is less than 10,000, I'll do it. Smoky was a little worried. Little E, isn't it too risky? Our situation now is different from our situation back then. We have some strength now, unlike us who were purely looking for death back then. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. There are some risks you have to take. Senior Marshal Sister, you've seen it for yourself. What Qin Xian said was very clear. These people from Qin Kong could not fight a stalemate. Their enthusiasm would not last for long because the main force of Xuanyuan's three pristines did not appear. This fact could not be hidden from them. In clear sky, unless the three pure ones of Xianyuan appeared in large numbers, these fellows would not have a true backbone. This was the disadvantage of having a few dominant families in a domain. Once the backbone was pulled out, it would immediately become a soft-footed shrimp. That's why I have to make use of the time when they haven't softened. Smoky pondered. Is that why you don't want to use the macromembrane? Lu Xiaoyi nodded. What's the most important thing about macromembrane attack and defense? It was the system. In the azure sky, only when the number of cultivators of the three pure ones reached a certain level would the system be able to work perfectly. It required coordination, meticulousness, tenacity, and selflessness. Now that the main force of the three pure ones in Tai is not here at all, it's basically impossible for those disorganized cultivators to complete such a system of defense. Comparatively speaking, it's better to let them fight in the open. At least they can still wield the first three axes properly. Including us swordsmen, in fact, we can't fully display our strength in macromembrane attack and defense. Which of the heaven's chosen forces that I brought with me have experienced the wear and tear of the macromembrane? They're all experts if they were to be pulled out to fight. If they were to be pushed back and forth in the macromembrane, sooner or later they would be pushed back and forth by the organized forces of Buddhism. It was not that Smoky did not understand this logic, but pulling 200 people out to fight to the death and pulling 4,000 people out to fight to the death was not the same decision. Lu Xiaoyi smiled and looked at her gently. That's why you see, Senior Marshal Sister, there are so many benefits. Not only can we fully display the battle prowess of the swordsmen, the immemorial beasts, and the heaven's chosen people, but we can also maximize the temporary enthusiasm of Qin Kong's remaining forces to protect the world. The universe is vast, and we can also run away anytime and anywhere. In that case, why don't we pull them out to fight? I know you're worried about our numbers, but what I want to tell you is that when the numbers reach a certain level, the more important factors are actually other factors, such as momentum, determination, and not fearing death. If that's really the case, there's no difference between 4,000 and 10,000. In a war in the mortal world, this is a battle of the same level. You've already said that the main force of Buddhism is in the fifth ring, so the ones here must be the auxiliary forces. If we don't even dare to fight the auxiliary forces, how can we be of use in the fifth ring in the future? Momentum needs to be accumulated step by step, it can't be produced out of thin air. A mighty army that has been through hundreds of battles can only be confident that they will win through continuous victories. No army can be trained or bragged, it can only be built through killing. Smoky smiled sweetly. All right, I can't win against you in an argument, so I'll listen to you. But little E, you have to be careful of the great Buddha. Don't think that just because you killed a great Buddha on Fanjiang Island, you really think that you're on par with the Sun God. At that time, without tens of thousands of cultivators attacking the formation, without the Buddha using his body to replace the formation, you wouldn't have been able to kill him. Lu Xiaoyi laughed evilly. I'm not that bold. Don't worry, the Sun God among the enemies will be dealt with by the ancient beasts and sea beasts. Their skin is rough and their flesh is thick, they can resist and control. We've already discussed it, they'll be in front, I'll practice asking 3 lives from the back. Smokey covered her mouth and laughed. Little E, you're still so sinister. You're already so powerful, why haven't I seen your sword heart? The courage to face it? Lu Xiaoyi was indignant. Senior sister, I've already treated the Sun God as an opponent, how can I have a sword heart? The two of them silently looked at the peaks of Mount E. There wouldn't be many opportunities like this in the future. When the war broke out, they were exhausted from running for their lives. This was the 5th ring. After the 5th ring, there was probably still a long way to go. Little E, how does it feel to be back? Lu Xiaoyi heaved a sigh of relief and satisfaction. It's great that everyone is here. Especially when I see that senior sister has gained another 2 kilograms. This is more important to me than the change of an era. Smokey smiled faintly. Come, tell me about your romantic history in Zhou. I've heard that there's a senior sister Xia and a senior sister Jia. Why are they both senior sisters? Do you have a grudge against junior sister? Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Which bastard is gossiping behind my back? Isn't it all because of you, senior sister? How good is senior sister? You know how to dote on people, you have experience, you're gentle and considerate, and you don't even need to. That? Smokey narrowed her eyes. No need to take responsibility? Little E, where did you come to this conclusion? Chapter 1356. Everyone knew that a short period of peace was precious. If they wanted to obtain true peace, they had to exchange it with something. I heard that you have learned a new escape technique, tremor escape? Looking at the 3 people in front of him, Lu Xiaoyi was very gratified. His high hopes were not in vain. The 3 of them had all grown up. They were all in the late stage of yawning, especially Huang Xuya. Her cultivation speed was much faster than his. Bing Ke glared fiercely at Li Peinan. What a talkative guy. Senior brother, actually I'm not the only one who knows tremor escape. Senior brother Li knows it too. My legs are shaking, but senior brother's cheeks are shaking. Lu Xiaoyi ignored the teasing between the brothers. These people called him senior brother out of nostalgia for the past, which made them seem closer. How do you feel about the sword play with the group of people I brought these few days? Li Peinan's face was red, but he still answered honestly. A little worse. Lu Xiaoyi did not blame them. In fact, in terms of material selection, experience, and hardship, the swordsmen he brought were really better than Bing Ke and Li Peinan. But this did not mean everything. You have to put down your pride. Don't think that just because you are from Xianyuan, you are arrogant. You are learning the traditional system, but they are learning the direct teachings of the Crow ancestor. There is no difference between the two. When there is a chance in the future, they will join Xianyuan to re-standardize the foundation. You may also go to the Heaven's Choice Sword Dao tablet to further your studies. But before that, you have to learn how to learn from each other's strengths to make up for your weaknesses. The 3 of them humbly listened to the advice. Senior brother was still the same senior brother. Even if he had left Xianyuan for such a long time, once he used his sword, he was still invincible. This made them feel that the gap between them was getting bigger and bigger, so big that it made them feel hopeless. But they were all magnanimous. Why would they want to compare with their senior brother? Wasn't this making things difficult for themselves? He looked at Bing Ke and suddenly an idea popped up in his mind. Bingku, you haven't acknowledged your master yet? Bingku was a little shy. Li Peinan then spoke up for justice. It's not that you haven't acknowledged him, but they are all dead. Now I, your senior brother, am the only one left standing here. It's quite tiring. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. I have someone in mind. You also know that there's an old Taoist who came with me. Yes, it's Wenji. He's well versed in astronomy and geography. He's very knowledgeable. He knows the past 500 years and the future 500 years. Why don't I introduce him to you so that you two can get to know each other? The ice guest was not picky. He now knew that he was not qualified to be picky. In the blue sky pavilion, he could only fool outsiders. All right, I'll definitely work harder and find a new master so that I can take care of him in his old age. Huang Xiaoya had been silent the entire time. Only after her two senior brothers had left did she take out a jade slip from her ring. Senior brother, when you gave me this back then, were you lying to me? Lu Xiaoyi was a little embarrassed. Now that he thought about it, it was very funny. However, he still had to keep up appearances. Nonsense, why would I lie to you? Look, isn't the great change coming now? This shows that my prediction is very reliable. Xiaoya is not bad. She knows the severity of the matter. She hasn't handed in this thing yet. Come, return it to your senior brother. Let's call it quits. Huang Xiaoya did not listen to him. Instead, she put away the jade slip again. No, I want to keep it. Because this jade slip has tied me up for 700 years. There was a hint of resentment in her tone. In fact, she was thanking her senior brother for constantly spurring her on through the jade slip, making her work even harder for the illusory danger of the sect, for the person who could help her get out of the place of exile. They had all grown up. Looking at Huang Xiaoya flying away, he could not help but sigh. Senior brother! Can you stop being so stubborn? Just say what you lack, Ziqing or something else? I've prepared a lot for you this time. In the end, none of you want one or two? Why, do you think that my Ziqing is stained with blood? Are you afraid of karma? Yanbo stepped out from behind and said bluntly. They don't want it because they're still young. Plucking Ziqing itself is a process of training. I don't want it because I have my own reserves. What I lack is not this. Lu Xiaoyi was very serious. Senior brother, we've known each other for a long time. If you hadn't followed me all the way, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to walk back to the dome. Although I don't agree with the way you do missions, the friendship between us brothers should not be strained because of time and cultivation. Tell me, what can I help you with? Back then, in the four-man team of Wolf Ridge, eldest brother Guang Bei left early. Now, the second brother Yanbo was at the end of his life and had not officially started to break through to the next realm. This made him and Yanqing very anxious. However, a problem that could be solved with resources was not a problem. What Yanbo was facing now was other problems that others could not interfere with. Yanbo looked straight at him. Little E! In the next battle, I request to be placed at the forefront of your sword soldier army. This, can you promise me? Lu Xiaoyi did not evade. I've never heard of anyone who could fight in the upper realm. That's a rumor. It's not true. I need a reason. Yanbo was silent for a moment. In front of his most trusted friend, he revealed the truth. A few decades ago, in a battle in the void, a senior brother and I encountered a powerful enemy in the universe. Even with the two of us working together, we could not defeat him. You also know the rules of our Xianyuan. Swordsmen cannot be afraid of difficulties and dangers in the outside world. Thus, that senior brother and I both used our ultimate skills to launch a final attack. The enemy was too strong. That senior brother fought with his life, but in the end, he did not succeed. However, I retreated at the last moment. I have always hidden this stain in my heart. I am unable to forgive myself. Over time, an inner demon grew, and I was unable to extricate myself. Thus, I hope to obtain the most dangerous position, so that I can find myself in a life-or-death battle. Otherwise, my nascent soul will never succeed. Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. Senior brother, do you know why you have an inner demon? You've been pretending your whole life. You are just a Yuanying. Why do you have to pretend to be a sword immortal? Retreating? There have been many times when I have retreated when I was roaming the Zhou immortal. I only need to find a few excuses to fool myself. Why do I have to brood over it like you? If you can't win, running away is a matter of course. Are you stupid? If all swordsmen are like you, they will become extinct sooner or later. Yen Bo did not accept this. I'm not you. I'm not that thick-skinned. I admit, I've been pretending my whole life, and I've put myself in a trap. Now that I want to break this trap, I have to prove myself through the most dangerous battle. I can't be as shameless as you and think of a few half-hearted excuses to free myself. Our paths are different, so our solutions are also different. Don't try to fool me with your bullshit excuses. Do you dare to say that you have thought of running away at the most critical moment? I need this opportunity. Chapter 1357. Lu Xiaoyi did not stay idle in terms of tactical arrangements. He couldn't control the others, nor could he control them. But at the very least, this group of people that he had brought along had to be organized and coordinated. They couldn't just randomly go up and throw a bunch of punches. Because they were the main force, the core. He looked at Long Jian and Xiongbu, who were the leaders of Martial Saint Training Hall and Physique Lineage. I need a never-ending attacking force, like a person's fists, attacking back and forth, not giving the opponent time to breathe. To do this, I can only rely on your attacking ability, which is also what you are best at. The key is to attack alternately, and attack continuously. This requires close coordination between the two of you, always maintaining the greatest attacking pressure. Can you do it? The two of them looked at each other, and Xiongbu smiled. This is our specialty. I understand General's intention, which is to not be stubborn. When one side explodes, let the other side take over. This way, we can accumulate momentum and move forward. Lu Xiaoyi was very satisfied. There was no need for heavy hammers, they were all veterans, and understood with a little guidance. He then looked at Ho Shui and Go Yuan, who were the remnants of Blood River sect and soul cultivators. I also need a force that can be pulled out at any time to block the battlefield, defend the area, and delay the enemy. Blood River sect is the most suitable for these. But you have enough defense, but not enough offense, or in other words, it takes too much time. It doesn't matter in individual battles, but in a large-scale war, it will be a drag. So, my request is to release your authority over Blood River, and let the soul cultivators cooperate with you in Blood River. This way, you will not only be defending, but also a trap that eats people without spitting out the bones. This requires unconditional trust between you, and you will live and die together. Can you do it? Ho Shui did not hesitate. The war was imminent, how could he not know what was more important? We will share the secret of Blood River with the soul cultivators. Go Yuan narrowed his eyes. The soul cultivator's spirit will be with Blood River. Lu Xiaoyi finally looked at the immemorial beasts. Lord Lu, Lord Ying, the most difficult task in the battlefield is how to deal with the opponent's great Buddha. I will be honest, I did not give it to the sea beasts, because they can't handle it. Xian Lu opened his 9 mouths. Of course they can't. Only we primordial beasts have the experience and strength to deal with the great Buddhas of the Buddhist sects. Don't worry, we'll hold them back. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Let's get a little wilder. I plan to kill a few more of them. I'll have to rely on your help. The immemorial beasts laughed in unison. They understood the swordsman's thoughts too well. Moreover, these were not empty words. The sword strike on Fangzhang Island was enough to prove it. As the Azure Space Great World waited, the entire realm underwent some changes. In the direction of public opinion, Various versions of protecting the family and protecting the world were being disseminated in an organized manner. Rumors of external enemies dying but not dying were spreading like wildfire. The tradition of blue sky was being pushed to a whole new level. The restlessness continued to ferment. There were also countless reports of foreign enemies eating people. Inhumane, cruel, and bloody. The people of Zhuozhou were organizing to deal with the situation together. The army of the Fifth Ring Army was rushing to the rescue under the night sky. Everything, real and fake, fabricated and fabricated, was purposefully propagating and creating momentum. 3 months after Qing Kong was finally organized, news from beyond the heavens arrived. 8,000 monks had appeared near the Whisker Upper Realm. They were less than a month away from Blue Sky's position. For a moment, the sirens of the 7 continents, including the oceans, were blaring in the sky above Blue Sky. The sirens created by Qin Xian were similar to the air raid sirens in Lu Xiaoyi's previous life. The sirens were incessant, causing people to feel uneasy and restless. Other than flying out to join the group, there was no other way. As long as they could fly out of the atmosphere, they were all flying out. This was the result of the public opinion attack launched by the two of them in the short span of a few months. Defend our blue sky, fight the Hong membrane. All the cultivators felt the pressure of this public opinion, especially the middle-level and low-level cultivators. They were the group of people who were the easiest to be bewitched. They had already become fanatical from the incessant public opinion. They only hated that they could not go out into the universe. However, they could still do some things. For example, sending their own elders out. Banners, petitions, red flowers, parades. In the eyes of the fanatical young cultivators, if you had the ability but did not fly out of the Hong membrane to fight, you were not fit to be a cultivator, not fit to be a teacher, not fit to be a human. Some small sects and families had only Yuanning cultivators who had a belly full of reason and difficulties that they had nowhere to vent. They were forcefully pushed into the void by the fanatical atmosphere below. While they were ascending, their own disciples and countless ignorant mortals were cheering, causing these great cultivators to have complicated feelings. You're rushing to send your ancestors to their coffins. Of course, most of the major cultivators were self-aware. They knew that they could not escape from this hurdle. All of this was just one of the dirty tricks that the two sinister fellows had set up in the past 3 months. They knew that it was difficult to completely change the worldview of the major cultivators, but they could change the worldview of the middle-level and low-level cultivators in the shortest time possible. It was also another kind of flattery. Together with coercion, enticement, drawing up high in the sky, threatening, destroying the enemy, elevating oneself. They even did not hesitate to fabricate a lie that the main force of the Fifth Ring's reinforcements were on the way. They did everything to offset the fact that the main force of Xuanyuan's 3 pristines, and Tai was not in Blue Sky. It could not be helped. This was not the Fifth Ring. After 10,000 years, the native cultivators here had long been familiar with the life under the powerful protection of Xuanyuan's 3 pristines. It was too wishful thinking to let them be filled with passion after 10 or 20,000 years. Up until now, the two sinister fellows did not reveal any intention of dragging them out to fight. This was because they knew that if such a crazy decision was made too early, many people would not be able to bear the pressure and leave. Therefore, the gathering outside the great membrane was now a general assembly. Once everyone was gathered, under the constraints of military rules, they would reveal their true intentions. In the void outside Blue Sky's great membrane, banners were fluttering. Banners were a product of war in the mortal world. Cultivators would never do such a childish thing. However, one had to admit that the fluttering banners had a strong psychological effect on the collective activities of the human race. Especially when many people were still half-hearted and had a hidden fear in their hearts. At this moment, the green banners were everywhere. The cultivators under the banners were like wolves and tigers, howling continuously. Just in terms of visual effects, each person held a huge green flag. If they stood a little further apart, 1,000 people would have the aura of 3,000 people. Unknowingly, it made the people who were gradually getting involved forget the actual disparity in their numbers. Qin Xian pursed his lips and looked at the fluttering banners in the void. Although the swelling momentum was very fake, it was indeed very effective on those who were not brave enough. It could make everyone think that they were creating history, changing the future, and achieving personal glory. In fact, whether it was history or the future, it had nothing to do with you. That would always belong to the very few elites. This grandson. What a jerk! He had actually forgotten that the 3 priests under his command had done the same kind of dirty hypocrisy. Chapter 1358. More and more cultivators gathered in the blue sky continent. According to the previous arrangement, they were divided into 8 battle groups. Of course, there were differences in strength among them. It was not only about numbers, but also about their cohesiveness and cohesion. In this regard, the North Region Battle Group was the leader, followed by Nanluo, Donghai, Shiga, Haishou, Highland, and Thousand Island Region. 3 months was too short a time. To refine the orthodoxy's fighting style, they lacked the strength to intervene. This was the legacy of the Tai of the 3 Pure Ones. If you asked the swordsmen to integrate these Taoists, it would only make things worse. Half a day later, the Qing Sky cultivators gathered in outer space. 8 battle groups, more than 4,000 cultivators, this was all they had. For a region with a long history and glory, it was a little pitiful. Because excluding the reinforcements brought by Lu Xiaoyi, the entire Qing Sky only managed to gather 2,000 people. This was the consequence of sending seeds to the 5th ring on a large scale. Most of the good seedlings were sent away. How many of them could reach the upper state? Lu Shi stood in front of the battle group as the green flag fluttered in the wind. He was a little proud. He had to make up a poem. To fool thousands of people at the same time, the pressure was great, and the requirements were high. The universe is in chaos, the great Tao collapses, the epic changes, and people's minds change. Cowardly people would see death, fear, and destruction in such a change. But fearless people see hope. So tell me, what do you see? Hope! Loud voices sounded. Of course, this was Lu Xiaoyi's private army, the people of the North Region, and Qin Xian's allies. Their voices were loud but not loud enough. However, after a few shouts, the emotions of the others were stirred. After all, who would be willing to admit that they were cowards? Even if this was a huge confusion of concepts, before you see hope, you have to go through the test of death. Lu Xiaoyi was satisfied and suppressed the voices of the cultivators. Qing Sky is being attacked because we are the source of the chaos. We are the source of the great changes, the vanguard that overthrows order, the culprit that buries the past, the culprit of blood and fire. A timid person would only see the burden, the guilt, and the punishment. However, the brave ones would only see the rewards. So tell me, what do you see? Gains! This time, there was no need to be taught. After all, every cultivator's pursuit of profit. Wealth comes from danger. If you don't understand this, you shouldn't cultivate. Go to the mortal world to leave your bloodline, and then live by the heavens. If your descendants are filial, they can still burn some paper money for you. But if you don't have any descendants, you'll just be a lonely ghost in the netherworld. But us cultivators, we shouldn't be like that. Lu Xiaoyi's voice was stern. When I fight, I never consider how many people there are. I only consider how many storage rings they have. Do you think you have enough storage rings? He raised his hand and snatched a green flag. Green light scattered as he waved it. There is no eternity in this cultivation world universe, to the universe. There would be a day when an outsider would invade blue sky. Will be it. There will be a day when Qing Kong will be enslaved and destroyed. There will be universe will anu. By the universe there will be there because today, we are here. With us here, Qing Sky will never perish. Loud cheers resounded through the void universe. This time, it was from the bottom of their hearts. After countless days of oppression, it had become a temporary consensus to find a way to vent. Old Taoist Wenji looked at the intoxicated cultivators beside him. He seemed to be able to hear the wild power flowing in their veins. He sighed in admiration. This ability to fool people was indeed worthy of being the Lord of Faith. If he was willing to spread faith with all his strength, would the Tao of Faith not be carried forward? Lu Xiaoyi pointed ahead. Monk group? Useless chickens and pottery dogs. What we have to do today is to let them know why Taoism is the boss and Buddhism can only be second in the millions of years of the cultivation world in the universe. When the boss beats the second, do you need to hide in the macro membrane? Do you need to rely on the power of heaven and earth to take advantage of this meaningless advantage? Do you need to passively defend and wait for the opponent to raise his fist and then consider where to dodge? When a wild dog barks, will you close the door and hide behind the door to swing a stick? No need. You only need to rush over and kick it. Now follow me. Find them and give them a kick. Lu Xiaoyi unfolded the green flag in his hand and took the lead. Behind him, the swordsman, the immemorial beast, the private army and the north region followed in succession. Under the encouragement of Qin Xian and the other 3 pure ones, the 8 battle groups moved in succession. Once the army moved, it would not be up to you even if you wanted to leave. It was also to protect the realm and the cultivator's Tao heart. Of course, it was also to coerce. Little Miao followed closely behind Lu Xiaoyi. She was a little scared, but more than that, she was excited. Because of the big scene of the war, because of Senior Brother's challenge. Senior Brother, I never thought that I would participate in such a meaningful scene. It's too spectacular, too surging, too. Senior Brother, why do I feel that there are still a few people who are a little reluctant? Shouldn't it be the responsibility of every blue sky person to protect their home? Lu Xiaoyi sighed. You don't understand the war between human cultivators. Actually, most of them, even if their realm is invaded, can still continue to live their good lives. There's not much difference, it's just a change of leader. No matter who it is, as long as it's a human, they need these basic forces. Life has to go on. To them, the glory of blue sky is too far away from them, it doesn't have much practical significance. Glory belongs to Xianyuan, the 3 pure ones in Tai, it doesn't belong to them at the bottom. This is the reason why I'm wasting my breath. In the 5th ring, I don't need to say these things at all. Little Miao was a little confused. She seemed to understand but not fully. This is a battle of orthodoxy, not a battle of races. Is it like this? Lu Xiaoyi nodded. Little Miao was very smart. Yes, that's roughly what it means. So as a side battlefield under the situation where the forces invested are limited, other races, such as Zerg and the like, can't come. That will incite the entire left Zhou to resist. The ones who come must be humans. Buddhism. Little Miao nodded. So it's like this. Lu Xiaoyi looked at it. When I say those words again, when you're no longer agitated and want to fight with your life on the line, then you'll be considered to have completely grown up. Now you tell me, why are you following behind me? Once the battle starts, my little life is hanging on my waist. I don't have the time to take care of you. Little Miao was unmoved. Senior Brother, if there's a day when I'm really not agitated anymore, then will you still bring me around the universe? And I'll be with my senior sisters, it won't hinder you from killing people. Chapter 1359. The 2 armies were moving towards each other. Just like how the monk army was being watched by the blue sky people, the blue sky army was also being watched by the monks. Both sides were too big, so big that they couldn't hide their tracks at all. 4,300 people, less than 500 perfected monarchs. I'm curious, where did they find so many perfected monarchs? Great Buddha Yuan Ming was a little suspicious. They had control over the situation of the entire Zhuo galaxy. In the blue sky, they had the Dezhen Temple as their eyes, as well as the various strategic routes in the Zhuozhou. It was very difficult for a large group of cultivators to pass through without being noticed by them. Of course, the teleportation of prenatal spiritual treasures was an exception. We can't monitor the blue sky completely. We were worried that it would arouse unnecessary suspicion. My guess is that these people should be excavating the potential of the Zhuozhou. The blue sky has more than 2,000 Yuanian cultivators. If they were to gather from other regions, it wouldn't be surprising for them to gather 2,000 people. Great Buddha Deshan stated his guess. The leader Fa Nan asked, "The blue sky people want to attack. What do you think?" Deshan didn't hesitate. If the Xianyuan swordsman is the main force, of course we shouldn't attack. This is common knowledge in the universe's self-cultivation world. But if it's a motley crew, we should still be afraid of attacking. Then what's the point of this trip? 8,000 monks being chased all over the void by 4,000 Wandala swordsmen, is that very honorable? The self-cultivation world's war is the forerunner. If we choose to retreat in the first battle, how are we going to fight in the following battles? The enemy's momentum is rising. Even if we retreat to the Grand Membrane, who knows how much we'll have to pay? I think we should just attack. There's no need to hesitate. However, Yuan Ming had a different opinion. Great Master Deshan is right. But before that, why don't we consider the reason why they rushed out of the universe? 4,000 people is a lot. If they just hide and defend, not only will we need a lot of time to attack, we'll also have to pay a lot of casualties. Then, why did they choose the difficult over the easy? What's the secret behind this? Their opinions were somewhat different. Some wanted to fight head-on, while others wanted to see what Qin Kongren was up to. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, they set their sights on a skinny and shriveled great Buddha. His name was Huiji, which meant that his wisdom stopped at me. He was the brains of the army, and everyone admired his profound insight. Huiji chanted the name of Buddha. Why can Qin Kong gather 4,000 people? We don't have enough information, so we can't make a judgment. This is blindness, not something that can be replaced by mental judgment. But I can probably guess why they pulled them out to fight against us. Seeing that everyone was listening attentively, he smiled and said, "You Buddhas only consider the numbers, but not the will to fight. In a large-scale war, the latter was sometimes more important." Just as Grandmaster Wanzhang had reported last year, at that time, there were no signs of an organization in Azure Sky. Now, for some unknown reason, a small group of people had joined and changed everything. It had to be said that this small group of people was very capable. They could solve the problem of quantity, but they couldn't solve the problem of the people's hearts in a short period of time. Therefore, guarding the great membrane of heaven and earth was more difficult for them. If they were to fight, at least they could rely on their will to attack. This was the reason why they had to rush out. It was not voluntary, but they had no choice. With Huiji's words, the few great Buddhas nodded repeatedly. It was a very in-depth view, and one sentence woke them up. Fa Nen immediately made the decision. Passed down the order immediately. 8,000 monks, form 16 great Arhat formations. We will face the enemy head-on, so that we can teach these stubborn people what Buddha's might is. When both sides didn't want to hide, the collision was unavoidable. Qin Xian came to Lu Shi's side. "General, our current attack formation won't work." The current formation that Qin Xian mentioned was actually not a formation at all. It was to put the most powerful at the front, and the rest followed behind. This was the most standard attack formation, but with the difference in quantity, they would fall into a strange circle. The elites would be surrounded by layers, and the weaklings would be isolated outside. Without the guidance of the core, it was unrealistic to expect them to do their best. It meant that they needed to make full use of the strength of these weaklings. Let the weaklings be surrounded by layers, while the elites waited outside for an opportunity to attack the enemy's strength. Lu Xue had been waiting for him to say this for a long time. However, these words couldn't be said by him, but by Qin Xian, the deputy commander, because the weaklings were basically supported by the cultivators of the three pure ones system. We can tolerate them taking a defensive position in the collision. Tell them that they only need to delay, there's no need to take the risk to rush in and kill. It was not that Lu Xiaoyi was kind, but even if they were there to attract the firepower, they still needed to hold on for a longer time, right? Qin Xian's heart was as hard as iron. Most of these people were indeed allies of the three pure ones, but after all, they were not the three pure ones. In war, there were always sacrifices, and everyone had to play their own value, whether it was the value of a hero or cannon fodder. Later on, I will change the arrangement of the formation as we move forward, so that each of the regional legions will have the opportunity to take the lead, and let them gradually adapt to this change. When they really come into contact, they won't be the first to explode. I will command them to hold on as long as possible. However, you must act quickly, because I can't guarantee how long I can hold on. Lu Xiaoyi put away his cynicism and said solemnly, "Don't worry, in our Azure Sky Legion, there's no such thing as purposely weakening anyone. There's no need for that at all. Also, my suggestion is that you all gather together as much as possible. Based on the principle of space, you need 8 people to surround one. The tighter you are, the longer you can hold on, and the more chances we have on the outside." In the following march, under Qin Xian's command, the Azure Sky Legion changed directions a few times, and each of the regional legions would take the lead for a period of time. In the beginning, they felt uncomfortable and afraid, and wondered why they had become the vanguard. However, in the process of meeting the attack, the regional legions gradually adapted to this change, and subconsciously took it as normal, thinking that when the two armies collided, the strongest legion would be at the front. Who knew that all of this was already under the control of the two treacherous commanders? Before the collision, the order had already been set. The first formation would be led by the relatively cohesive Nanluo Legion, and next to them would be the Big Fish Belly Thousand Island region and Chuanshan Highlands. This was the first echelon. The second echelon would be led by the Sea Beasts, and the East Sea and West Sand would be the second echelon. Their purpose was to penetrate deep into the monk army, and attract the monks to surround them, so that the elites on the outside could make a move. In a large-scale war between cultivators, they would definitely stick together and pay attention to formations. Once they were alone, they would definitely die under the concentrated fire of the enemy. No matter what, it would not be a 4,000 versus 2 battle. To compare the strength of a force, people could cite many indicators, such as numbers, realms, orthodoxies, cooperation, and so on. However, there was an invisible indicator that was the most important, and that was the occupation. What were the occupations of the armies of the other forces? Those who concocted pills, those who made weapons, those who drew talismans, those who were carefree, those who were merciful, those who were free and unfettered, those who indulged themselves in the world. Fighting was only a way to ensure that they maintained their hobby. But the people of the Fifth Ring were different. They only had one hobby and one profession: fighting. After tens of thousands of years of fighting, they had long known what to do and what to prepare. They did not need to be taught, nor did they need to be encouraged. When the order was given, countless figures rose from the 5 rings of the continent. Those who remained were not excited. They just quietly polished themselves, hoping that one day they could join the ranks of their ancestors. Dozens of Sun Spirit Supremes gathered together. They were all leaders of the orthodoxies of the 5 rings, so it was not a problem for them to organize their teams. They had cooperated countless times in the past 10,000 years. This time, it was just a larger scale, that was all. Taoist Chang Jin waved his hand. 4 forces attacking from different directions. Damn, their timing is quite accurate, so we have to deal with them at the same time. Just this arrangement alone is enough to show that the bald donkeys have put in a lot of effort. Everyone laughed. In fact, not long after the four forces appeared, the fifth ring had discovered their traces one after another. In fact, they could have started attacking 2 years ago. However, this time, the four forces were extremely accurate in their timing, making it difficult for the fifth ring to make the first move. With the domain of the fifth ring here, if they sent forces to attack too early, it would be easy to cause them to lose control of the overall situation. Once the attack was not smooth and they were more than a year away, should they continue attacking? Or should they withdraw their forces and find another way? If the entire battlefield was too scattered, it was not suitable for professional armies like them to cooperate. In terms of overall strength, the invaders were definitely much stronger. Their advantage lay in the coordination between their professions. If the battlefield was pulled too far apart because of the distance, they would lose their biggest advantage. Therefore, after some discussion, everyone agreed that it would be more appropriate to place the invaders within the range of 2 to 3 months away from the fifth ring. It was also because of this judgment that the fifth ring people, who had always been proactive, did not take the initiative to attack any of the enemy forces, not even the swordsmen of Vanguard. They were afraid that if you attacked and the enemy ran away, would you chase or not? Now that the enemy was within 4 months of the fifth ring, it was time for them to make their move. They could not be too close to the fifth ring. It was too easy to be caught in the crossfire. Qin Yangzi, the head of the three purities, reminded them in the end. We have divided the forces of the fifth ring into 5 parts. This is not a good war strategy, but in the current situation, we cannot turn a blind eye to any of the forces. However, although dividing forces is unavoidable, we can make it more important. The order of which side to destroy first must be clear. In principle, of course, the best plan is to destroy the main forces of the Buddhists, but everyone knows very well that the Buddhists are actually the most difficult to destroy. Not only are they strong, more importantly, they are the most cunning. As for the immemorial beasts, we do not know how strong their fighting spirit is right now. In other words, there is still a possibility of winning them over. After all, we have lived in peace for millions of years. Maybe this is just the immemorial beasts venting their emotions. There is no need to waste our most important forces on them before everything is clear. Let's focus on restraining them. The winged men. We do not understand them. In theory, they are similar to the immemorial beasts, but they are more manic and harder to grasp. They are more mercenary. We may not be able to offer better conditions than the Buddhists. At the very least, we will not be able to get them out of the wingspan dimension. Therefore, they will be a very difficult opponent to deal with. The possibility of reaching some kind of understanding in the end is not high. Zerg, there is no need to talk about this. They are the mortal enemies of mankind. There is no room for reconciliation. If they succeed, it will cause a huge impact on the fifth ring's mortal world. Looking at everyone, he said. Therefore, the Fifth Ring Alliance's countermeasure is to concentrate our superior forces and attack Zerg first. Then, we will use our respective restraining forces to entangle the other 3 forces and buy time for Zerg to be eliminated. After the first phase of the strategic goal is completed, we will decide whether to attack the Buddhists or the winged ones. The great Buddhist sects in the nearby 100 universes had gathered, and many of them were not inferior to the 3 pure ones. How could they be so easily entangled? He had to pay with his life. The winged people might not be as intelligent as humans, but the difference was limited. However, in terms of individual strength, they were still above the insect swarm. The key was that they had enough numbers. If a supreme being were to fight alone, the possible losses would be enough to make one's heart tremble. Finally, Chang Jin set his eyes on a very special Kun Xiu Yang spirit. Fellow Taoist Tong Yen, I don't have any subordinates for you to send. Just like me, Sangarama Oracle can only face the enemy alone. Close to 400 holy beasts of the archaic era. If the negotiations fail, Sangharan will be exterminated. You, Jialan, will come out unscathed. Do you have the guts? The baby-faced woman smiled. Fellow Taoist, you must be joking. In times of danger, Sangharan is not afraid to face death. You want to exterminate my Sangharan? At least half of the holy beasts will be lying down. The reason why he chose Sangharan was not only because it was the third largest Taoist power in the 5 rings after the 3 pure ones. At this level, there was no other power in the 5 rings that could stand shoulder to shoulder with it. They were proficient in mystery and had some strange abilities. Historically, they were also very close to the holy beasts of the 5 rings. Moreover, this sect's way of doing things was like hiding a needle in silk floss. They were very particular about methods and methods. With them taking action, there was a possibility of a peaceful solution. The universe was in chaos, but it was not to make everyone their enemy. If they could fight for it, they had to fight for it. Sending Sangharan to deal with the holy beasts of the immemorial era was to save their forces and to fight for peace. However, they had to bear the risks themselves. As Tong Yen said, if the negotiations failed, the upper echelons of Sangharan would be wiped out. Chang Jin roared. The last team is called the reserve team, but you and I both know that they are all cultivators from our hometown. Although there are enough of them, they won't be able to fight in a real battle. The significance of their existence is, firstly, to guard against the attacks of the winged men, and secondly, to ensure that all of us can be mobilized without any distractions. Therefore, don't expect to be rescued. There are no gains or losses for the 4 sides. The failure of each team will affect the final situation. I hope that everyone will work together and come back victorious. When we return, I will hold a feast here to entertain everyone. At the beginning of the journey, they moved forward in silence. Different from the countless fluttering banners in other places, there were no big banners here. Instead, there were tens of thousands of cultivators, each with firm steps. Their big banners were in their hearts. Water couldn't water through them, and wind couldn't blow them away. Indeed, the wind of the great wind plays a war song, and dragons and snakes appear from the clouds. We are not from Palai, slaying gods and Buddhas with a long tassel in hand. The 5 rings were attacking, and Zhou Xian was retreating. Retreating was a tactic and also a character. Of course, it was also a specific situation. In their opinion, even if the 5 rings encountered the Heaven's Choice, they would definitely retreat. Using the word overwhelming to describe the number of Heaven's Choice cultivators was a bit inappropriate. An army of over 100,000 cultivators surrounded Zhou Xian in 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. In fact, it was meaningless because the people of Zhou Xian did not come out at all. What were they doing? They were eating and drinking as they should. Even in the main hall of the Qingwei Immortal Sect, a group of powerful young gods was gathered to drink and watch the dance. At the same time, the scene was transmitted to the outside of the chessboard of heaven and earth as a form of respect. The people of Zhou Xian were relatively soft in dealing with external affairs, but they were not so soft that they would bow and scrape. In the face of a powerful enemy, the arrogance of the people of Zhou Xian was aroused. Don't you have a lot of people? Okay, let's play a game of chess. The young gods on the screen were still immersed in singing and dancing, but their actual conversation was far from that. They did not dare to slack off in the slightest on their own defense, and they wanted to be perfect. We have strengthened the chessboard of heaven and earth to its final mode. It is connected to the 3,000 continents and the core of the earth. As long as we are willing, we can open the chessboard mode at any time. Each continent will be listed as a separate game. Let's play 3,000 games slowly. We have to be careful of the Heaven's Choice's tactics. They have a much richer foundation in this aspect than we do. They can always see their ancestors. In my opinion, we should use our jigsaw and Tao Ming together and make the final decision in a crucial game. Should we organize an external attack? We don't really want to achieve any results, but we must make them feel pressured and have no choice but to be vigilant at all times outside the huge Qi layer of Zhou Xian. They can be on guard for a year or 2, But I don't believe that they can be vigilant for decades or centuries. Even if we don't kill them, we will exhaust them to death. We have to be on guard internally. Over the years, we have only heard that the people of Zhou Xian have gone to the Heaven's Choice, but we have never heard of the Heaven's Choice coming to our Zhou Xian. How is that possible? They must be plotting something if they are so low-key. We can't let our guard down at some important key points. We should set up a long-range energy beam tower. At the very least, we should gather all the energy devices on the floating rafts and release them out of the blue. If we can catch a few of them, we can count ourselves lucky. If we can't, we can make them nervous at all times. And so on. The people of Zhou Xian looked cool, but they were actually very bad. Chapter 1362. On the left side of the galaxy, the two forces, one attacking and one defending, finally met. This time, it was time for real. Under Qin Xian's perfect control, the 600 cultivators of Nanluoning State were at the front. They were sandwiched by the Thousand Island region and the Highland Army, and behind them were the sea beasts. They had no other choice but to keep moving forward. Qin Xian had put in a lot of effort for this. To be honest, if Qin Xian wasn't here, he couldn't do it himself. Even if he could still lead this group of people, it must be his private army at the front. Otherwise, they couldn't lead the others. Qin Xian was different. He came from the Three Pure Ones and had a lot of support from the Three Pure Ones. These people had a lot of influence in the Qin Kong Taoist school, otherwise, they couldn't have done this. Lu Xiaoyi also knew that this guy was trying to tell him that even though he had brought reinforcements, it did not represent all the factors that led to victory. There were many factors other than strength that affected the progress of the war. It was a kind of healthy competition. Hopefully, the two of them could keep this balance. The ice guest was still trembling. Even if it was not a charge of 200 people, but 4,000 people. It seemed that if he didn't tremble, he couldn't vent the tension in his heart. When he trembled, Li Peinan next to him also trembled. Now there was one more person. Little Miao was also trembling. Damn you, are you going to create your own branch of vibrating sword? Li Peinan felt that he had lost face. He swore that after this battle, he must leave this guy. If this guy was in Qin Kong, he would go to Wu Huan, and vice versa. The ice guest also felt wrong. He didn't want to tremble, but he couldn't control himself. Before he was trembling because of fear, but now he was trembling because of excitement. He was always like this when he was in a big situation. Senior brother is right. I will go back and do more research in this area. Maybe I can make a name for myself in the cultivation world. In ancient times there was the wine sword immortal, and now there is the vibrating sword immortal. But little Miao, your teeth are shaking like this, will you break your gums? The ultimate battle form of demonic beasts was always their original form. Therefore, little Miao was now a cute palace's cat. Yenqin gave the two of them a strict order to protect it. Senior brothers, I'm not TikTok, I'm TikTok. Little Miao was smart. It put its tail in its mouth. Although its tail hurt a little, it didn't make any noise. Li Peinan instructed. Little Miao, follow me closely. Don't follow that sword immortal, it will kill you. Although the northern region army only had about 400 men, there were 70 to 80 Xianyuan swordsmen among them. Although they were all old men, they were very experienced. Needless to say, they were very powerful in battle. The rest were also the tyrants of the North region. In terms of spirit, they were the most willing to fight among the 7 continents of the Blue Sky continent. They were also a force to be reckoned with. In terms of strength, they were ranked behind the ancient vicious beasts and the sword soldiers. They were about the same as Blood River, Martial Saint Palace, Soul Cultivators, and Body Meridians. With Smokey and Yanai leading the way, they would not be able to escape from a fierce battle. Everyone has fear. Especially in such a situation for the first time, if one wanted to appear fearless, it would be nonsense. A true warrior could only grow in battle. When two armies faced each other, tens of thousands of people gathered together. That was a completely different matter from an individual battle. In this sense, the real veterans were actually the old swordsmen on Zhonglao Peak. Their perception of the enemy, from the aura and divine sense, to now vaguely visible to the naked eye. At this moment, there was no room for retreat. Even the most cowardly person knew that it was more dangerous to retreat now than to charge forward. Treasures, forbidden arts, talismans. Fortify the body. Gather. Avoid collision. Qin Xian hid in the Nanluo army and gave the last order in the last few breaths. He still needed to pretend to be the commander, and create the conditions for Lu Xiaoyi to kill. He had to admit that he was a very competent assistant. He was indispensable. The two armies of Taoists and Buddhists who were in the middle of a collision each emitted a brilliant Taoist and Buddhist radiance, and blasted towards each other. At the same time, the Buddhists in the sky above the Buddhist formation began to support, while the Taoist formation was protected by the gods in the sky. From afar, it looked like a group of glittering Buddhists were charging towards another group of three pristine Taoists who were surrounded by dense purple clouds. Attack and defense reached the critical point of saturation in the few breaths before the collision. Those who were brave would focus more on attacking, while those who were timid would focus on defense first. Everyone had their own focus. But no matter how they focused on it, it was still unusual for a group of cultivators to be able to create the appearance of a battle between gods and Buddhists. Some of the cultivators in the first row were unable to withstand the concentrated fire of the other party and collapsed. Then, the second row, the third row. Thus, a new type of celestial phenomenon appeared in the sky of gods and Buddhas, the Tao dissipating celestial phenomenon. Of course, the battle between cultivators was different from the battle in the mortal world. But the battle between cultivators was similar to the battle in the mortal world. The principle was that those who stood at the front were always the unluckiest. At first contact, the difference in strength between the Taoists and Buddhist formation was very obvious. Although overall, only a few people were killed, almost all of them came from the blue sky formation. It was not that the Taoist strength was much weaker than the monks, but it was a matter of mentality. When the first echelon of the blue sky formation rushed in, almost all of them focused on their own defense, while the monks' formation was standard for both attack and defense. But due to the difference in organization and coordination, the blue sky formation was obviously at a disadvantage. But fortunately, in terms of losses, it was still within an acceptable range. A few Grand Buddhists immediately discovered the true strength of the blue sky formation, which made them put down the last trace of worry. If it was at this level, this battle in the void was basically settled. But there was still one last variable. In the blue sky formation, the 300 primordial beasts were particularly eye-catching. Under the leadership of more than 20 young spirit beasts, they almost rushed a 500-man Arhat formation into a mess, causing a lot of damage. Buddha Yuanming said in shock, "Primordial fierce beasts? Why are they here? Is this their formation?" Huiji shouted from the side, "Don't make a fuss! Even the holy beasts have formed a formation, how can the fierce beasts not? We can't let them go on like this, especially those young spirit beasts among them." Fa Nan reacted quickly. "Let's meet them. We can't let them get involved in the formation battle. Dafa, Tingchan, the formation battle will be commanded by the two of you." If the cultivators below the half-immortal level were divided into two layers, one was the young spirit supreme who could be reborn, and the other was the other cultivators who could not be reborn. On the battlefield, it would basically be divided into two battlefields. The young spirits would establish their own battlefield, and the other cultivators would fight in a chaotic mess. This was not the mortal world's sense of soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals, but the cultivators' evaluation of their own abilities. If the young spirits mixed in with the ordinary cultivators, of course, They would cause a large number of casualties in an instant, but because they were trapped in the formation and were frequently reborn, the enemy's yang spirit could see through the truth of the three lives. Therefore, whether it was from the perspective of the battlefield as a whole, or from an individual's cultivation to the yang spirit step, it was not easy. The yang spirits of both sides would choose to fight alone instead of being mixed together. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.